The storm had passed, but what Ezekiel Marsh found in his yard defied all logic. Blood, fresh blood on drought-cracked earth, and tracks, impossibly large human footprints leading to his barn. Ezekiel's weathered hand tightened around his Winchester. At 45, the former Union captain still carried himself like a soldier. Back straight, eyes sharp, movements deliberate. 15 years after Gettysburg, his left leg still ached before rain, but his aim remained deadly. "Show yourself," he called, voice cutting through the dawn silence. The answer came as a low groan from inside the barn. Ezekiel approached cautiously, rifle ready. The Arizona Territory of 1875 forgave no mistakes. Out here, 20 miles from the nearest neighbor, a man was judge, jury, and, when necessary, executioner. He nudged the barn door with his boot. It swung open to reveal two figures sprawled on the hay-strewn floor. Women, Navajo women, one clutching a bloody side, the other unconscious. And they were giants. Even lying down, they stretched nearly 6.5 feet, the taller one possibly approaching 7. Their frames were powerful, built for survival in this unforgiving land. The intricate silver and turquoise jewelry marking them as highborn caught the early light. Every survival instinct Ezekiel possessed screamed one truth. Helping Indians meant death for settlers like him. That was the iron law of the frontier. But as the conscious woman's eyes locked onto his, Ezekiel saw something that shattered every assumption he'd held. Not fury or hatred, but desperate human fear. The same terror he'd felt watching his wife and son die of fever 3 years after the war. The same helplessness he'd known as his eastern farm failed, and he'd been forced west with nothing but a land grant and broken promises. "Please," the woman whispered in broken English, her deep voice carrying a natural authority even in weakness. "Help, sister." Ezekiel lowered his rifle. "I'm either the biggest fool on the frontier," he muttered, "or the last man with a conscience." He knelt beside them, medical kit in hand, and made his choice. 3 hours earlier, Ezekiel had stood in Prescott's smoky saloon, facing down 3 men who wanted his land. "Mr. Marsh," drawled Thomas Sawyer, foreman for the Arizona Western Railroad Company, "Mr. Blackwood's final offer is more than generous. $2,000 for worthless scrub you can barely farm." Ezekiel took a slow sip of whiskey. "Not interested." "Be reasonable." Sawyer leaned closer, tobacco-stained teeth bared in what passed for a smile. "Land's going to be worth nothing once the railroad goes through the valley instead." "My land, my choice," Ezekiel replied. The largest of Sawyer's companions, a brute with brass knuckles adorning meaty fists, stepped forward. "Some folks just need persuading, Tom." Ezekiel set down his glass with deliberate care. "A man without land is nothing in this country, and I've been nothing before." His voice dropped. "Won't be nothing again." The brute lunged. 15 years had passed since Gettysburg, but some reflexes never fade. Ezekiel's first strike crushed the man's windpipe. The second dropped Sawyer to his knees. The third man backed away, hands raised. Ezekiel straightened his coat. "Tell Blackwood my land's not for sale, not for 2,000, not for 20,000. The saloon had fallen silent, patrons frozen mid-drink. "You just made a powerful enemy, Marsh," gasped Sawyer from the floor. "Wouldn't be my first." Ezekiel tossed a coin on the bar and walked out into the Arizona night. Now, as morning light streamed through barn windows, Ezekiel worked to save the wounded Navajo woman's life. "Name?" he asked the conscious sister as he cleaned a deep knife wound. "Ayana," she gestured to her unconscious sister. "I tell." We know who you are, Ezekiel Marsh," Ayana interrupted, her English surprisingly good. "Man who refuses to sell to Blackwood." Ezekiel's hands stilled. "How do you know about that?" "Blackwood wants Navajo land too, for railroad, for gold." The word hung in the air. Gold. The rumor that had brought prospectors flooding into the territory, setting up claims that encroached on both settler and native lands. "There's gold on your reservation?" Ezekiel asked, tying off a bandage. "Small amounts. Not important to us." Ayana's dark eyes narrowed. "Very important to white men." Ezekiel thought of the small vein he'd discovered in his north pasture last spring. Barely enough to be profitable, but he'd kept it secret, knowing what gold fever did to men. "Why are you running from Blackwood?" he asked, moving to check Itel's head wound. "He took us to force our father to sign paper." Ayana's massive frame tensed with anger. "We escaped. Men with knives followed." "Your father?" "Chief Nalish." Ezekiel nearly dropped his bandages. He was harboring the daughters of a Navajo chief, women who would be frantically searched for by both their people and Blackwood's men. "You need to leave as soon as your sister can travel," he said firmly. "We leave. Blackwood finds us." Ayana met his gaze steadily. "You helped Indian girl by river 3 moons ago, chief's youngest daughter." Ezekiel froze. "How did you—" "She described man who saved her. Tall soldier with beard like fire and eyes like storm. Man who asked no payment." The memory flashed before him. A young girl caught in floodwaters, her small body nearly crushed by debris. He'd pulled her free, nursed her fever, then guided her toward Navajo territory once she could walk. "I didn't know she was Chief's daughter," he said. "Just a child who needed help." "3 daughters of Chief you saved now," Ayana said, her deep voice softening. "Navajo do not forget such debt." Outside, thunder rumbled, another storm approaching. "Your wound needs rest," Ezekiel said, rising. "I'll check the perimeter." He stepped outside, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes. In the distance, dust clouds rose, riders approaching from the south. Too many riders for a casual visit. Returning quickly to the barn, he found Itel awake, her imposing frame propped against a hay bale. Despite her injury, she carried herself with natural dignity. "They come," he told them simply. "How many?" Ayana asked, already reaching for a knife at her belt. 6, maybe 8 riders. Moving fast. The sisters exchanged glances. "Blackwood's men," Itel said, speaking for the first time, her English more accented than her sister's. Ezekiel made his decision. Into the house. Now, Uktkum. The hidden cellar beneath Ezekiel's cabin had been dug by the previous owner. A paranoid miner convinced the government was tracking his movements. Now it served a better purpose, concealing the Navajo women as hoofbeats approached. "Not a sound," Ezekiel whispered, closing the trap door and covering it with a rug. He'd barely settled into his chair, rifle across his lap in casual readiness, when the riders thundered into his yard. Thomas Sawyer dismounted first, his bruised face darkening at the sight of Ezekiel. 7 armed men flanked him, including the 3rd man from the saloon. "Marsh," Sawyer called. "We're tracking 2 Indian thieves. Navajo women stole valuable property from Mr. Blackwood." "Haven't seen any Indians," Ezekiel replied evenly. "Just me and the cattle." Sawyer's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we look around? There's blood on your property." "Slaughtered a steer yesterday. And yes, I do mind. This is private property. We've got authority to search for fugitives." Sawyer gestured, and 2 men started toward the barn. Ezekiel's rifle barrel rose fractionally. "You've got no authority here, Sawyer. No badge, no warrant." The men hesitated, looking to Sawyer, who measured the deadly calm in Ezekiel's eyes. "We'll be back, Marsh, with the sheriff and proper papers." Sawyer spat tobacco juice onto Ezekiel's porch. "Helping Indians is a hanging offense in these parts." "So is trespassing," Ezekiel replied, "and my aim hasn't faltered since Antietam." Sawyer remounted, a nasty smile spreading across his face. "Mr. Blackwood's offering a reward now. $200 for information on those women." "Good day, gentlemen," Ezekiel said pointedly. He remained motionless on the porch until the riders disappeared over the ridge, then moved quickly to the cellar. The Navajo sisters had heard everything. "You risk much," Ayana said as she emerged. "Why?" Why? Ezekiel thought of his wife and son, long buried in Pennsylvania soil, of the farm foreclosed when crop prices collapsed after the war, of the land grant out west that was supposed to offer a new beginning. "Because a man's worth is measured by what he stands for," he said finally. "And some things matter more than safety." Itel studied him with intelligent eyes. "Blackwood returns with law. What then?" "Then we'd better have a plan." Night fell with another storm building on the horizon. Ezekiel sat at his rough-hewn table, a map of the territory spread before him. The sisters had shared what they knew of Blackwood's operations, how the railroad baron had bribed officials to redraw reservation boundaries, how he'd threatened and intimidated those who refused to sell. "Your father must be searching for you," Ezekiel said, marking potential routes with a pencil. Chief sends warriors, Ayana confirmed, but they search wrong places. Blackwood told them we went north. Why did he take you specifically? Ezekiel asked. Surely there are easier hostages than the chief's daughters. The sisters exchanged glances. We are warriors, Itel explained, her massive frame somehow elegant despite her injuries. Trained since childhood to protect our people. Father trusted us to negotiate with white officials. And we found proof of Blackwood's crimes, Ayana added. Documents showing bribes, false treaties. Ezekiel straightened. You have evidence against Blackwood? Had, Etel corrected bitterly, taken when we captured. A plan began forming in Ezekiel's mind. If they could recover that evidence, expose Blackwood's corruption. A distant sound interrupted his thoughts. Horses approaching. Too many to be Sawyer returning. Get down, he hissed, dousing the lamp. Through the window, a procession of mounted figures emerged from the darkness. 15, maybe 20 riders. But these weren't Blackwood's men. Their distinctive blankets and silver ornaments were unmistakable. Navajo warriors, armed and moving with purpose. Father, Ayana whispered, a rare smile transforming her serious face. As if in answer, a commanding voice called out in Navajo. Itel replied immediately, her deep voice carrying through the night. The lead rider dismounted, a powerfully built man whose straight posture and elaborate headdress marked him as the chief. Your father? Ezekiel asked unnecessarily. Yes, Ayana confirmed, but we must be careful. Father will not know if you are friend or enemy. What should I do? Put down weapons. Walk out with hands open. I speak for you. Ezekiel set his rifle against the wall and stepped onto the porch, hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. The Navajo warriors' bows and rifles tracked his movement. Chief Nalish stood in the yard, an imposing figure even among his tall warriors. His weathered face remained expressionless as Ayana emerged behind Ezekiel, speaking rapidly in Navajo. The chief listened, then approached. Up close, his resemblance to his daughters was clear. The same high cheekbones, the same penetrating gaze. You are Ezekiel Marsh, he said in perfect English, surprising Ezekiel. The man who saved my youngest daughter from the river. I am. And now you shelter my elder daughters from their enemies. The chief studied him carefully. Why would a white settler risk his life for Navajo? Because it was right, Ezekiel answered simply. Chief Nalish nodded slowly, seeming to find what he sought in Ezekiel's face. The white man called Blackwood hunts my daughters, he said. He claims they stole from him. They were escaping captivity, Ezekiel replied. Blackwood took them to force your cooperation. I know this. Blackwood wants our land for his iron road and for the yellow metal beneath it. The chief's expression hardened. He does not understand. Land is not owned. Land is... A warrior galloped into the yard, shouting urgently in Navajo. Chief Nalish's head snapped up. Riders coming, Ayana translated quickly. Many, with badges. Federal marshals, the chief growled. Blackwood's puppets. Ezekiel's mind raced. Harboring fugitives, even wrongfully accused ones, would see him hanged or imprisoned. The Navajo could escape into the night, but he would be left facing federal charges. You must go, he told the chief. Take your daughters and ride for the reservation. Chief Nalish shook his head. They will follow, and you will be punished for helping us. I'll handle it. No, Ayana interjected firmly. We stayed together. The thundering of approaching horses grew louder. There is another way, Chief Nalish said suddenly, but it requires great trust. What way? Ezekiel asked. According to the Treaty of 1868, Navajo can claim protective custody of those who have saved tribal members from death. The chief's eyes gleamed with unexpected cunning. You have saved 3 of my daughters. By treaty law, you can claim protection of the tribe. What does that mean exactly, Ezekiel asked, even as the riders' torches became visible on the ridge. It means, Chief Nalish said with the first hint of a smile, that for now you become Navajo. The marshals crested the hill, a dozen armed men led by a grim-faced official whose silver star caught the moonlight. Behind Ezekiel, the Navajo warriors formed a protective semicircle. In that moment, standing between 2 worlds, Ezekiel Marsh made the decision that would change everything. I accept your protection, he told Chief Nalish, and I'll stand with your people against Blackwood." The chief nodded once, removed a silver and turquoise medallion from his neck, and placed it over Ezekiel's head. "Then let us face them together, brother." The federal marshals reined in before the cabin, rifles ready. Their leader, a hard-eyed man with a cavalry mustache, surveyed the scene with obvious displeasure. "I'm Federal Marshal William Kane," he announced. "I have warrants for 2 Navajo women and orders to search these premises." His gaze fixed on Ezekiel. "Step aside, citizen." Chief Nalish stepped forward instead. "This man is under protection of Navajo Nation. Your warrants have no power here." Marshal Kane's face darkened. "This is federal territory, Chief. Your tribal laws don't supersede federal authority." Treaty of 1868 recognizes right of Navajo to extend protection to those who save tribal members from death, the chief countered. "This man has saved 3 of my daughters. Federal government signed this treaty." Kane's horse shifted nervously beneath him. "That's a convenient interpretation." "It is written law," Chief Nalish replied calmly. "Ask your territorial governor if you doubt me." The standoff stretched, neither side willing to back down. Ezekiel felt the weight of the medallion against his chest, a physical symbol of the choice he'd made. Finally, Kane lowered his rifle, though his expression remained murderous. "This isn't over. I'll be consulting with the territorial offices about this interpretation." "Do so," Chief Nalish agreed. "Until then, no man enters this land without permission." As the marshals reluctantly withdrew, Ezekiel knew he'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He was now enemies with both Blackwood and federal authorities. Looking at Ayanna and Itel, women who had risked everything to protect their people, he found he didn't regret it. "What happens now?" he asked the chief. Chief Nalish gazed at the retreating marshals, his expression grim. "Now, Ezekiel Marsh, we prepare for war. Blackwood will not stop until he has what he wants." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the determined faces surrounding Ezekiel. In that flash, he saw the battle ahead with perfect clarity, not just for his land or theirs, but for something more fundamental: the right to determine one's own destiny. "Then let him come," Ezekiel said quietly. "Some things are worth fighting for." In the distance, thunder rolled across the Arizona desert like the drums of approaching conflict. Dawn broke over Ezekiel's homestead with uncertain promise. The Navajo had established a protective perimeter around his property. 8 warriors stationed as lookouts while the rest made camp in the meadow beyond his corral. Their presence transformed his isolated ranch into something resembling a military encampment. Inside his cabin, Ezekiel studied Chief Nalish across the rough-hewn table. The Navajo leader had spent the night explaining the complexities of the 1868 treaty and what it meant for both of them. "Blackwood will not accept this alliance easily," the chief said, tracing a route on Ezekiel's map. "He has friends in territorial government." "And enemies?" Ezekiel asked. A slight smile crossed the chief's weathered face. "One in particular, James Cooper, special investigator from Washington. He arrived in Prescott last week asking questions about land deals." "A federal investigator?" Hope flickered in Ezekiel's chest. That could change everything. "If he lives long enough," Chief Nalish replied grimly. "Blackwood's men follow him constantly." Ayanna entered, ducking her towering frame beneath the doorway. Despite her imposing height, she moved with surprising grace. "Riders approaching from the east," she reported. "Not soldiers. 1 wagon, 4 horsemen." Ezekiel grabbed his rifle and followed her outside. The morning sun illuminated a small party approaching, a covered wagon flanked by armed riders. "Not Blackwood's men," Ayanna observed, shielding her eyes. "Different clothes. Older men." As the party drew closer, Ezekiel recognized one of the riders, Harold Wilson, owner of Prescott's General Store. A friend, or at least not an enemy. The others were local ranchers he knew by sight, if not by name. Chief Nalish joined them on the porch, watching warily as the wagon halted in the yard. "Morning, Marsh," Wilson called, removing his hat. "Quite a gathering you've got here." "What brings you out this way, Harold?" Ezekiel asked, rifle lowered but ready. Wilson dismounted stiffly. At 65, his riding days should have been behind him. "Thought you should know what's happening in town," he said. "Blackwood's telling everyone you've gone renegade, siding with Indians against your own kind." "And you believe that?" Ezekiel's voice hardened. "Course not," Wilson scoffed. Known you 5 years. Man who pulled 3 children from that schoolhouse fire isn't turning savage. He nodded respectfully toward Chief Nalish. No offense meant. None taken, the chief replied evenly. Words have different meanings to different peoples. Wilson gestured toward the wagon. Martha wanted to come herself, but her rheumatism's acting up. Sent supplies instead. Flour, coffee, ammunition. Ezekiel was momentarily speechless. Martha Wilson, Harold's wife and owner of the territorial newspaper, was a formidable ally. There are others in town who don't trust Blackwood, Wilson continued. Man buys too much influence. Folks remember when he drove the Henderson family off their claim last year. One of the other riders nodded grimly. My cousin worked Blackwood's mine near Flagstaff. Collapsed last winter. 15 men dead. No compensation for families. Chief Nalish stepped forward. You risk much coming here. Some risks worth taking, Wilson replied. Blackwood's called a town meeting for tomorrow. Says he's got announcements about the railroad route. He turned back to Ezekiel. Thought you might want to attend. That would be unwise, Chief Nalish interjected. Marshal Kane will arrest him immediately. Not if he's under my protection, Wilson countered. I'm still a county commissioner, and Martha's newspaper reaches all the way to Washington. Ezekiel considered the invitation. A public confrontation was dangerous, but it might be their best chance to expose Blackwood's schemes. There's more, Wilson added, lowering his voice. That federal investigator Cooper will be there. Martha arranged a private meeting afterward. Chief Nalish and Ezekiel exchanged meaningful glances. I'll go, Ezekiel decided, but not alone. The Navajo cannot enter Prescott without risking bloodshed, Chief Nalish said. Not all of you, Ezekiel agreed. Just her. He nodded toward Ayana. The chief's daughter raised an eyebrow. They will recognize me. Not if we're careful. Ezekiel turned to Wilson. Is Martha's offer of settlers' clothes still good? The old storekeeper smiled. Wagons full of them. Thomas Sawyer slammed his fist on Jacob Blackwood's mahogany desk, rattling the crystal decanter. With all due respect, sir, Marsh has made fools of us. We should burn him out tonight. Jacob Blackwood, railroad baron, mine owner, and unofficial king of the Arizona Territory, merely sipped his brandy. At 58, his silver hair and tailored Eastern suits gave him the appearance of respectability that his ruthless business practices belied. Violence is a tool of last resort, Mr. Sawyer, he replied calmly. It attracts unwanted attention from Washington. The Navajo are camped on his property. They've invoked some treaty nonsense. I'm aware of the situation. Blackwood set down his glass. Chief Nalish is cleverer than I anticipated. In Marsh, he studied the territorial map on his wall. I underestimated his principles. What about the federal marshal? Sawyer pressed. Kane's practically on our payroll. Marshal Kane has received a telegram from the territorial governor requesting clarification on the treaty issue. Blackwood's thin smile held no warmth. These matters take time to resolve. Time we don't have. The investors arrive next week. They expect clear title to the right-of-way. And they shall have it. Blackwood rose, moving to the window overlooking Prescott's main street. Tomorrow's town meeting will secure public support. I've arranged for several concerned citizens to speak about the economic benefits of the railroad. And Cooper, the Washington investigator? Blackwood's expression darkened. Mr. Cooper will find his investigation complicated by unreliable witnesses and missing documents. He turned back to Sawyer. Now I have a more productive task for you than breaking furniture. From his desk drawer, he withdrew a folded document bearing an official seal. This arrived from Judge Patterson this morning. A proper search warrant for Ezekiel Marsh's property, specifically authorizing recovery of stolen documents in property belonging to the Arizona Western Railroad Company. Sawyer's face split in an ugly grin. When do we serve it? You don't. Blackwood handed him the paper. Marshal Kane will handle that personally during tomorrow's town meeting when Marsh is conveniently absent from his property. What if he doesn't attend? He'll attend. Oh, Blackwood returned to his desk. Harold Wilson's visit this morning guaranteed it. The old fool thinks himself subtle, but I have eyes everywhere. And the chief's daughters? Blackwood's fingers drummed a steady rhythm on the desktop. Find them. The documents they stole contained signatures that could prove problematic, especially with Cooper asking questions. And if they resist? Then Mr. Sawyer, Blackwood said coldly, violence becomes a tool of necessity. Twilight painted the desert in fading gold as Ezekiel saddled his horse. The journey to Prescott would take several hours, and he preferred traveling under cover of darkness. Ayanna emerged from the cabin wearing Martha Wilson's donated clothes, a long dress and duster coat that disguised her imposing height, her raven hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Despite the feminine attire, she moved with a warrior's confidence. "Strange clothes," she commented, adjusting the unfamiliar fabric. "They'll help you blend in," Ezekiel replied. "Most folks won't look twice at a tall woman, but they'll remember a Navajo one." Chief Nalish approached, carrying something wrapped in deerskin. "For the journey," he said, handing it to his daughter. Ayanna unwrapped the package to reveal an intricately decorated knife and a small buckskin pouch. "Father's medicine bundle," she explained to Ezekiel. "Protection. I tell join in them, her wounded side healing but still causing her to favor one leg. You should not go alone," she told her sister in Navajo, then switched to English for Ezekiel's benefit. "Blackwood's men will recognize you." "I will not be seen," Ayanna assured her. Chief Nalish placed his hands on Ezekiel's shoulders, a gesture of respect between equals. "Remember, under treaty protection, you speak with my voice. Any attack on you is an attack on the Navajo Nation." "I understand," Ezekiel said solemnly. "Be cautious with Cooper," the chief added. "Even honest white men may not understand our ways." With final instructions to his warriors, Chief Nalish watched as Ezekiel and Ayanna mounted their horses and rode west toward Prescott. The desert night engulfed them, stars emerging like distant campfires in the vast Arizona sky. They rode in companionable silence for the first hour, Ayanna easily keeping pace with Ezekiel despite her unfamiliarity with women's riding attire. "Your father risked much bringing his warriors to my land," Ezekiel observed finally. "The army won't look kindly on armed Navajo off the reservation." "Father walks narrow path," Ayanna replied. "Reservation slowly kills our people. Children hungry, elders sick. Government food never enough." She glanced at him. "But war would destroy us completely. So he fights with treaties instead of weapons." "Yes," uses white man's paper against him." There was unmistakable pride in her voice. "Father learned English at mission school, reads white man's books, understands white man's laws." "And you?" Ezekiel asked. "Where did you learn English?" A shadow crossed Ayanna's face. "Same mission school, 7 years. They take Navajo children, make them speak only English. Cut hair, change names." Ezekiel had heard of these schools, government attempts to civilize Native children by stripping away their culture. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Ayanna's chin lifted. "I learned their words, but kept our ways. Now I use their language against them." She studied him curiously. "You fought in Great War? Against other white men?" "I did. Union Army, Pennsylvania Infantry." "Why?" The simple question gave him pause. Most people didn't ask soldiers why they fought, especially not 15 years after the war. "At first, for the Union," he answered truthfully, "to preserve the country. Later, for my men, for the friends who died beside me." Ayanna nodded, understanding the warrior's code that transcended cultures. "You have no woman, no children?" she asked after another stretch of silence. "I did. Sarah. Our son, Thomas." The familiar ache returned, dulled by time but never truly healed. "Influenza took them in '68. "I am sorry," Ayanna said simply. Then after a respectful pause, "You never took another wife?" "Came west instead. Thought I could outrun the memories." He gave a humorless laugh. "Turns out memories have good horses." They crested a rise, and in the distance, Prescott's lights flickered like earthbound stars. "We should separate before town," Ezekiel said. "Less attention that way." "Where do I meet you?" "Martha Wilson's newspaper office. Back entrance after midnight." He hesitated. "Are you sure you can navigate the town alone?" Ayanna's smile flashed in the darkness. "I lived among white men for 7 years, Ezekiel Marsh. I can walk their streets for one night." They parted at the crossroads, Ezekiel taking the main road into Prescott, Ayanna circling to approach from the south. As the town's buildings rose before him, Ezekiel felt the weight of the chief's medallion beneath his shirt. He was no longer just fighting for his land. He was fighting for justice across two worlds. And tomorrow's confrontation would determine which world prevailed. The Arizona Sentinel's back office smelled of ink and paper dust. Martha Wilson, silver-haired and sharp-eyed despite her 70 years, poured coffee with a steady hand. "Blackwood's boys have been watching the front door all evening," she said. "Good thing Harold built that hidden entrance during the Apache troubles." Ezekiel accepted the steaming cup gratefully. The night air had turned surprisingly cold. "Thank you for arranging this, Martha." "Least I could do." She settled her substantial frame into a creaking chair. "That snake Blackwood's been trying to buy my newspaper for years. Offered double its worth last month." "Why refuse? Most would have taken the money." Martha snorted. "My father started this paper in '49. Said a frontier needs truth more than gold." She sipped her coffee. "Besides, what would I do? Knit doilies and wait for death? I'd rather die fighting tyrants." A soft knock at the back door interrupted them. Harold Wilson admitted Ayanna, who had discarded her hat, allowing her black hair to fall freely down her back. Martha's eyes widened at the Navajo woman's impressive height, but she recovered quickly. "Well, you're certainly your father's daughter," she said approvingly. "I met Chief Nalish during the treaty negotiations. Man has more integrity than the entire territorial legislature." "He sends his respects, Mrs. Wilson," Ayanna replied formally. Martha waved a hand. "Martha, please. Mrs. Wilson makes me feel like Harold's mother." Harold checked his pocket watch. "Cooper should be here soon. He's being careful. Blackwood's men have been following him since he arrived." As if summoned by his name, another knock sounded. Harold ushered in a lean, weathered man whose impeccable suit contrasted with his trail-hardened appearance. James Cooper, special investigator from the Department of the Interior, carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to dangerous situations. His gray hair and lined face suggested he was in his 60s, but his movements remained precise and deliberate. "Mr. Marsh," he said, offering a firm handshake, "your reputation precedes you. Not many men stand up to Jacob Blackwood." "Not many survive it either," Ezekiel replied dryly. Cooper's gaze shifted to Ayanna, recognition flashing in his eyes. "You must be Chief Nalish's daughter, the one who escaped Blackwood's custody." Ayanna nodded cautiously. "No need for alarm," Cooper assured her. "I've spent the last 3 months investigating Blackwood's land acquisitions across 3 territories. The man's methods would make a highwayman blush." Martha poured more coffee. "What brings a Washington investigator all the way to Arizona, Mr. Cooper?" "Not that we're complaining." Cooper accepted the cup with a thin smile. "Officially? Routine review of territorial land transactions. Unofficially?" He withdrew a leather portfolio from his jacket. "Complaints from displaced settlers and tribes have reached the president's desk. Blackwood's railroad has powerful Eastern investors, but even they draw the line at outright theft and murder." "You have evidence?" Ezekiel asked. "Some. Not enough." Cooper opened the portfolio, revealing maps and documents. "Blackwood's careful. He uses intermediaries, pays in cash, keeps few records." "My sister and I took papers from his safe," Ayanna interjected. "Ledger with names, amounts paid to officials, maps of Navajo land marked with gold deposits." Cooper leaned forward intently. "Where are these documents now?" "Blackwood's men took them when we escaped." The investigator's shoulders slumped slightly. "Without hard evidence, it's your word against his. And in territorial courts, Blackwood owns the judges," Martha finished grimly. "Not all of them," Cooper corrected. "Judge Hollister in Tucson has resisted Blackwood's influence. If we had evidence, he'd issue indictments." Ezekiel studied the territorial map on the table. "What about the treaty angle? Chief Nalish believes the 1868 treaty protects both the Navajo and those who have helped them." Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "The treaty does include unusual provisions for protective custody. It was added specifically because several Army officers had married into the tribe." "So it's valid?" Martha pressed. "In federal court, possibly. In territorial court?" Cooper shrugged. "Blackwood's judges will interpret it however he wants." "Then we need federal intervention," Ezekiel concluded. "Precisely, which is why tomorrow's town meeting is crucial." Cooper tapped the map. The territorial governor is sending a representative, someone who reports directly to Washington, beyond Blackwood's reach. Hope flickered across the room, but Ezekiel remained cautious. Blackwood wouldn't allow this meeting if he thought it might threaten him. Of course not, Cooper agreed. He's planning something. My sources say he'll announce the final railroad route, present it as progress for the territory, while conveniently running it through land he seized, Martha added bitterly. Including my property, Ezekiel noted, and the northeastern corner of the Navajo reservation. Ayana's expression darkened. Where our sacred springs lie, where our ancestors are buried. Cooper gathered his documents. We need to present a united front tomorrow, settler and native standing together against corruption. It will be dangerous, Ezekiel warned. Living under Blackwood's thumb is more dangerous, Martha replied. Harold and I have already spread the word to families hurt by his schemes. They'll attend. And the Navajo? Cooper asked. My father cannot bring warriors to town, Ayana said, but he will send speakers, elders respected by both peoples. Good. Cooper rose. Blackwood won't expect opposition. The shock alone might rattle him into a mistake. As the meeting concluded, Cooper pulled Ezekiel aside. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. Blackwood's obtained a search warrant for your property. Marshal Kane will likely serve it while you're in town. They won't find anything, Ezekiel replied. Chief Nalish's warriors remain on guard. Be careful, Marsh. Federal marshals confronting Navajo warriors could end badly for everyone. Ezekiel touched the medallion beneath his shirt. The chief understands the risks. I hope so. Cooper donned his hat. For all our sakes. Dawn found Ezekiel and Ayana in Martha Wilson's kitchen, reviewing plans for the town meeting. Harold had ridden ahead to scout Prescott's streets, watching for Blackwood's men. Cooper believes words will defeat Blackwood, Ayana observed skeptically. Words do not stop bullets. Sometimes they prevent bullets from being fired, Ezekiel replied, though he shared her doubts. If we can sway public opinion, force a federal investigation. Martha entered, carrying a bundle of newspapers. Hot off the press, she announced triumphantly. Special edition, exposing Blackwood's land grabs. Harold's distributing them now. The front page featured a detailed map of the territory with properties Blackwood had acquired through questionable means, highlighted in black. You've been collecting this information for some time, Ezekiel noted, impressed by the thoroughness. 5 years, Martha confirmed. Every displaced family, every suspicious fire, every foreclosure where Blackwood mysteriously acquired the deed. Her eyes gleamed with righteous fire. The truth was always the best weapon against tyrants. Harold burst through the back door, breathless and pale. Blackwood's men are rounding up anyone who takes a paper, he gasped. They're beating Tom Jenkins bloody in the street for distributing them. Martha blanched. Tom's 70 years old. They don't care, Harold said grimly. And that's not all. Blackwood's brought in extra men, gunfighters from Tucson. They're positioning themselves around town. He's preparing for trouble, Ezekiel realized. Cooper needs to know, Martha said. The meeting starts in an hour. I'll find him, Ezekiel decided, checking his revolver. Harold, take Martha somewhere safe. Ayana, stay with them, enable them. The Navajo woman shook her head. I go with you. It's too dangerous if they recognize you. I am warrior, she interrupted firmly. Daughter of Chief Nalish. I do not hide while others fight. Ezekiel recognized the same determination he'd seen in soldiers who would rather die than abandon their posts. Stay close then, and if trouble starts, I know how to disappear, she assured him. They slipped out through the newspaper's back door, entering Prescott's increasingly crowded streets. The town had swelled with visitors for Blackwood's announcement. Miners, ranchers, and merchants filled the boardwalks. Keeping to side streets, they made their way toward the courthouse where Cooper was staying. Ayana kept her head down, her tall frame less noticeable among the bustling crowd than Ezekiel had feared. As they passed an alley near the hotel, a muffled cry caught Ezekiel's attention. He signaled for Ayana to wait, drawing his revolver as he peered into the shadows. 3 men surrounded a fourth, their backs to Ezekiel. The victim, pinned against the wall, was James Cooper. Last chance, old man, one attacker growled. Give us the documents and tell us where the Indian woman is hiding. Cooper's face was already bloodied, but his expression remained defiant. Go to hell. The lead assailant raised his fist for another blow, only to freeze at the unmistakable sound of a revolver being cocked. "Step away," Ezekiel ordered quietly, nice and slow. The men turned, revealing Sawyer's brutish face among them. "Marsh," he spat. "Should have known you'd show up." "Let him go," Ezekiel repeated, keeping his aim steady. "3 against 1, Sawyer smirked. "Bad odds, even for a war hero." "2 against 3, Ayana's deep voice corrected as she stepped into the alley, Martha's kitchen knife gleaming in her hand. Despite the dress, there was no mistaking her now for anything but a warrior. Sawyer's eyes widened in recognition. "The chief's daughter!" "Release him," Ayana commanded, her imposing height adding weight to her words. Sawyer calculated his options, then nodded to his companions. They released Cooper, who slumped against the wall, coughing blood. "Blackwood knows you're here now," Sawyer warned, backing away. "Both of you. There won't be any peaceful meeting today." "Get out," Ezekiel growled. The men retreated, Sawyer pausing at the alley entrance. "This isn't over, Marsh. Not by a long shot." Once they disappeared, Ezekiel rushed to Cooper, who waved off his concern despite his injuries. "I'll live," the investigator wheezed, "but they took my documents. Everything I've collected on Blackwood's operations." "Can you still testify?" Ezekiel asked, helping him stand. Cooper nodded grimly. "They wanted information more than silence. They're hunting for something specific, something they fear." "The evidence my sister and I took," Ayana suggested. "Possibly." Cooper straightened his torn jacket with dignity. "The governor's representative arrived this morning. They won't dare harm a federal official." "Don't underestimate Blackwood's desperation," Ezekiel warned. A commotion from the main street interrupted them, raised voices and the clatter of horses. The meeting's starting early, Cooper realized. "We need to hurry." They emerged from the alley to find Prescott's streets transformed. Armed men positioned themselves on rooftops and balconies. Blackwood's hired guns establishing control. "He's turning this into a military operation," Ezekiel muttered. The courthouse square ahead was packed with townspeople. On the hastily constructed platform, Jacob Blackwood stood resplendent in a tailored suit, flanked by Marshal Kane and several territorial officials. As Ezekiel, Cooper, and Ayana approached the crowd's edge, they heard Blackwood's amplified voice. "Progress that will transform this territory. The Arizona Western Railroad will connect Prescott to markets east and west, bringing prosperity to all." The crowd's response was mixed. Cheers from those with financial interests, uncertain murmurs from others. "We need to get closer," Cooper urged. They pushed forward, drawing curious glances. Cooper with his battered face, Ayana's towering height, Ezekiel's determined expression. Blackwood unrolled a large map, pointing to the proposed railroad route. "Construction begins next month, creating hundreds of jobs. The federal government has approved our right-of-way through all territories, including," he paused meaningfully, "areas currently underutilized by native populations." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. "He's announcing the seizure of Navajo land," Ayana whispered in horror. "Without tribal consent," Cooper added. "That's explicitly forbidden by the treaty." Ezekiel spotted Martha and Harold Wilson near the platform, surrounded by a group of weathered ranchers and farmers. Martha caught his eye and nodded slightly. Blackwood continued, his voice rising triumphantly. "The territorial governor has signed the final approval this morning. Arizona's future is secure." "What about those whose lands you've stolen?" Martha Wilson's voice cut through the crowd's applause. "What about their future?" Blackwood's smile faltered momentarily before returning with practiced charm. "Mrs. Wilson, always the passionate advocate, I assure you all land acquisitions have been legal and fairly compensated." "Tell that to the Hendersons," someone shouted, "or the Millers, whose farm mysteriously burned after they refused to sell." Murmurs spread through the crowd as Martha's newspapers circulated despite Blackwood's efforts. "These are baseless accusations," Blackwood responded smoothly. "Progress requires change, and change is never without discomfort for some." "And the Navajo reservation?" Cooper called out, pushing forward. "Does progress justify violating federal treaties?" The crowd parted, revealing Cooper's battered face to the assembly. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Blackwood's expression hardened. "Mr. Cooper, I see you've had an unfortunate accident, Perhaps you should seek medical attention rather than disrupting public proceedings. This accident was delivered by your men, Cooper replied loudly, when I refused to surrender evidence of your crimes. Marshal Kane stepped forward. That's enough disruption. This meeting is official territorial business. Indeed it is, a new voice agreed. A well-dressed man rose from the official section. And as the governor's representative, I'm most interested in these allegations. Blackwood's facade of confidence cracked slightly. Governor Richardson fully supports the railroad project, Mr. Davis. These are merely disgruntled voices resistant to progress. Nevertheless, Davis replied firmly, serious accusations require investigation, particularly those involving federal treaties. Sensing the shift in momentum, Ezekiel stepped forward, the chief's medallion now visible against his shirt. Jacob Blackwood has attempted to seize my land through intimidation and fraud. When that failed, he targeted the Navajo reservation for its gold deposits. Preposterous, Blackwood sputtered. This man harbors fugitives. Marshal Kane, arrest him immediately. Kane moved toward Ezekiel, hand on his pistol. I claim protection under the Treaty of 1868, Ezekiel announced clearly. As one who has saved the lives of tribal members, I stand under Navajo protection. This is absurd, Blackwood scoffed. Marshal, do your duty. Kane hesitated, looking toward Davis for guidance. The governor's representative frowned. The treaty provisions regarding protective custody are complex legal matters that require proper review. While you review legal niceties, Blackwood snapped, this man harbors criminals. I have a valid search warrant for his property. Being executed as we speak, Kane added with grim satisfaction. Ezekiel's blood ran cold. You sent men to my ranch, where Chief Nalish's warriors are camped. Armed savages occupying territorial lands illegally, Blackwood corrected. Marshal Kane's deputies are merely enforcing the law. You've sent them to their deaths, Ayanna said, stepping forward and removing her hat. Her true identity now unmistakable, she addressed the crowd directly. This man kidnapped my sister and me to force our father to surrender our lands. When we escaped with evidence of his crimes, he branded us thieves. The crowd's mood shifted perceptibly, sympathy for the Navajo mixing with growing suspicion toward Blackwood. Arrest them both, Blackwood ordered desperately. Before Kane could move, riders thundered into the square. Navajo warriors led by Attell, her imposing frame unmistakable despite her healing wounds. What is this? Blackwood demanded as the crowd scattered to make way. Attell reined her horse before the platform. Your men attacked our camp, she announced, her accented English carrying across the square. They fired first. 2 of them died. The rest fled. Horror spread through the assembly. Armed confrontation between marshals and Navajo warriors meant one thing to frontier settlers: war. This is your doing, Blackwood, Ezekiel accused loudly. You've started a conflict to seize land for your railroad. Nonsense, Blackwood shouted, but fear had replaced confidence in his voice. These Indians attacked federal officers executing a lawful warrant. After your men opened fire, Attell countered, we defended ourselves, as is our right. The governor's representative stepped between them. Enough. This situation requires immediate federal intervention. He turned to Marshal Kane. Detain Mr. Blackwood pending investigation of these allegations. On what grounds? Blackwood demanded. Inciting conflict with a peaceful tribe, for starters, Davis replied coldly. Possibly conspiracy, fraud, and corruption as well. Before Kane could respond, shots rang out from a nearby rooftop. Davis clutched his chest, blood blossoming across his white shirt, and collapsed. Chaos erupted. Blackwood's gunmen opened fire from their positions above the square. Townspeople screamed, running for cover as bullets splintered wood and shattered windows. It's a massacre, Cooper shouted, pulling Ezekiel behind an overturned wagon. Through the mayhem, Ezekiel saw Blackwood escaping with Marshal Kane, heading toward the hotel. He planned this all along, Ezekiel realized. If he couldn't control the meeting, he'd end it with bloodshed. Ayanna and Attell fought their way to Ezekiel's position, the Navajo warriors providing covering fire for fleeing civilians. We must get out of town, Attell urged. Blackwood's men have blocked the main roads. Not without Cooper, Ezekiel insisted. searching for the investigator in the chaos. He spotted Cooper crawling toward Davis's fallen form, retrieving something from the representative's jacket pocket. A gunman on the hotel balcony took aim at Cooper's exposed back. "Cooper, down!" Ezekiel shouted, firing his revolver. The warning came too late. Cooper jerked as bullets tore through his body, but somehow continued moving, reaching Davis before collapsing beside him. Ezekiel raced across the bullet-swept square, Ayanna close behind. They reached Cooper as his life ebbed away. "Take this," the dying investigator gasped, pressing a small leather pouch into Ezekiel's hand. Davis brought it from Washington. Proof of Blackwood's bribes to congressmen. "Hold on," Ezekiel urged. "We'll get you to a doctor." Cooper's bloodied lips formed a final smile. "Too late for that. Stop Blackwood. Save the land." His eyes fixed on something beyond them, and he was gone. More gunfire rained down as Blackwood's men closed in. Ezekiel tucked the pouch securely inside his shirt. "We need to retreat," Ayanna insisted, pulling him away from Cooper's body. They joined the Navajo warriors who had established a defensive perimeter, allowing townspeople to escape the square. "Martha and Harold?" Ezekiel asked anxiously. "Safe," Etel confirmed, "already riding for their ranch with others." As they fought their way toward the town's edge, Ezekiel glimpsed Blackwood watching from the hotel window, Marshal Kane at his side. The railroad baron's expression was no longer that of a civilized businessman, but of a cornered predator. The battle for Prescott had ended in disaster. But the true war for justice, for the land, for survival itself had only just begun. Blood-red sunset painted Prescott's outskirts as Ezekiel and the Navajo warriors regrouped in a sheltered canyon 5 miles east of town. The day's events had transformed a peaceful protest into open conflict, with casualties on both sides. Most of the town's decent citizens had fled to outlying ranches, while Blackwood's men established armed control over Prescott. Itel tended to a warrior's bullet wound as Ezekiel studied the leather pouch Cooper had died delivering. Inside, he found official documents bearing congressional seals, along with a handwritten letter from the Secretary of the Interior. "What do they say?" Ayanna asked, kneeling beside him. "It's an official investigation order," Ezekiel replied, scanning the papers. Cooper wasn't just gathering evidence. He had authorization to suspend all railroad operations pending review. He held up another document. "And this is a list of payments from Arizona Western Railroad to 3 congressmen and the territorial governor." Blackwood knew these were coming, Ayanna concluded, why he hurried to announce the railroad project, and why he was willing to spark violence when the meeting turned against him. Ezekiel carefully returned the papers to the pouch. "With Cooper and Davis dead, these documents are our only proof of his corruption." Itel approached, wiping blood from her hands. "Father comes," she announced, gesturing toward the eastern ridge. Chief Nalish arrived with his remaining warriors, fewer than had ridden to Ezekiel's ranch days before. Their solemn faces told of the cost already paid. "How many lost?" Ezekiel asked quietly. 3 warriors, the chief replied, dismounting with dignified weariness. 2 marshals dead, 3 wounded. They came shooting, demanded we surrender. Blackwood wanted bloodshed, Ezekiel said bitterly. Now he has his pretext for military intervention. Chief Nalish nodded grimly. Already telegraph wires sing with news of Indian uprising. Army will respond within days. We have evidence of Blackwood's crimes, Ezekiel indicated the pouch, but no friendly judge to present it to. Judge Hollister in Tucson, Ayanna suggested. Cooper said he resisted Blackwood's influence. Tucson is 4 days hard ride, Etel pointed out. Army will move sooner. The chief studied the gathering darkness, his weathered face unreadable. We divide our strength, he decided finally. Warriors return to reservation, prepare our people for possible attack. And us, Ezekiel asked. You, my daughters, and 4 warriors ride for Tucson. Chief Nalish's gaze met Ezekiel's directly. Evidence must reach honest judge before Blackwood's story becomes official truth. A rider approached their canyon hideout at dangerous speed, horse-lathered despite the cooling evening air. The Navajo warriors readied weapons until Ezekiel recognized Harold Wilson's gray mare. It's Martha's husband, he called, hurrying to meet the elderly storekeeper. Harold dismounted stiffly, his face ashen with exhaustion. Blackwood's taken hostages, he gasped. Martha, Jensen's family, anyone who spoke against him at the meeting, holding them in the courthouse basement. Ezekiel's blood ran cold. Are they hurt? Not yet. He's declared martial law, claiming authority as acting territorial representative since Davis was killed. Harold's hands trembled. He's offering an exchange. The hostages for Cooper's documents and his eyes flicked to Ayanna and Itel, the chief's daughters. Trap, Itel stated flatly. Of course it's a trap, Harold agreed. But Martha's in there, 20 others too, including children. Chief Nalish's expression darkened. What deadline? Dawn tomorrow. If his terms aren't met, he'll try the hostages as Indian sympathizers under frontier justice laws. Harold's voice broke. We all know what that means. Ezekiel had seen frontier justice before for hasty trials followed by mass hangings, all technically legal under territorial emergency provisions. We need a plan, he said, turning to the chief. Before they could continue, another sound interrupted, multiple horses approaching rapidly. Military patrol, one of the warriors warned. Hide, Chief Nalish ordered, but it was too late. 6 mounted soldiers crested the rise, rifles ready. At their head rode a familiar figure, Captain James Sullivan, commanding officer of Fort Whipple. Ezekiel had done business with him before, selling hay for the fort's horses. Marsh, Sullivan called, reining his horse. Stand easy. We're not here to fight. The soldiers halted a respectful distance away, weapons lowered but ready. That's close enough, Captain, Ezekiel replied cautiously. What brings you out at this hour? Sullivan dismounted slowly, hands visible. Looking for you, actually. May I approach, alone? Chief Nalish nodded almost imperceptibly. Ezekiel stepped forward to meet the officer halfway between the groups. You're in a damned mess, Marsh, Sullivan said quietly. Blackwood's telling everyone you've gone renegade, leading an Indian uprising. And you believe that? I know you better than that, Sullivan glanced toward the Navajo. But the territorial governor's requesting military intervention. By tomorrow, I'll have orders I can't ignore. Blackwood orchestrated all of this, Ezekiel said urgently. He killed Cooper and Davis to prevent an investigation into his corruption. I figured it was something like that. Blackwood's story has more holes than a cavalry target. Sullivan lowered his voice further. Listen carefully. I can't officially help you, but I can look the other way for about 12 hours. After that, every soldier and marshal in the territory will be hunting you. Why are you risking this? Ezekiel asked. Sullivan's weathered face hardened. My younger brother had a mining claim near Flagstaff. Good silver deposit. Turned down Blackwood's offer. Next week, someone cut his support beams. 15 men died when that mine collapsed. I'm sorry. Save it. Just stop that bastard before he owns the whole territory. Sullivan handed Ezekiel a folded paper. Marshal service stations between here and Tucson. Avoid these roads, and take this. He offered a military dispatch pouch. Gets you past Army checkpoints. Says you're carrying official communications to Fort Lowell. Thank you, Ezekiel said sincerely. Sullivan remounted his horse. I never saw you. This conversation never happened. He tipped his hat. Good luck, Marsh. You're going to need it. As the soldiers departed, Ezekiel returned to the Navajo camp, Sullivan's warning adding urgency to their plans. We must move tonight, Chief Nalish declared after hearing Sullivan's message. Ezekiel and my daughters ride for Tucson with the evidence. What about the hostages? Harold demanded. The chief's expression remained impassive, but his eyes reflected inner conflict. We cannot sacrifice everything for few. Many more lives at stake. They're innocent people, Ezekiel argued. Martha Wilson helped us when no one else would. And we let Blackwood kill them. We are no better than him, Ayanna added firmly. Chief Nalish studied his daughters with a mixture of pride and resignation. You suggest what, then? Itel stepped forward, her powerful presence commanding attention. Divide our strength. Small group attempts rescue while main party heads for Tucson with evidence. Too dangerous, the chief objected. Blackwood expects rescue attempt. Which is why it must be unexpected, Itel countered. 2 warriors, myself and Harold. We know Prescott better than Blackwood's hired guns. Ezekiel shook his head. You're still injured from your escape. Let me go instead. No, Chief Nalish intervened. You must reach Judge Hollister. Documents worthless without your testimony? He turned to Harold. You know courthouse well? Helped build it 30 years ago, the old man confirmed. There's a tunnel from the old jail that connects to the basement. Blackwood's men probably don't know about it. Then it is decided, the chief declared. ITEL leads rescue party. Ezekiel and Ayana ride for Tucson with 2 warriors as guides and guards. He raised a hand to forestall further argument. We move now. Time works against us. As they prepared to separate, Ezekiel pulled ITEL aside. Be careful, he said. Blackwood's men won't hesitate to kill you on sight. The tall warrior woman smiled grimly. They must catch me first. Ezekiel hesitated, then removed his revolver, offering it to her. Take this. It's more reliable than that old cavalry pistol you're carrying. ITEL accepted the weapon with a respectful nod. I return it when we meet again. I'll hold you to that. Minutes later, 2 parties moved out in different directions. Harold and ITEL with 2 warriors heading west toward Prescott, while Ezekiel and Ayana rode southeast with their Navajo escorts, the precious documents secured in Sullivan's dispatch pouch. Chief Nalish watched them disappear into the darkness, then turned his remaining warriors toward the reservation. The path ahead would demand all his diplomatic skills to prevent full-scale war, a war his people could not win, regardless of the justice of their cause. Midnight shrouded Prescott in eerie silence as ITEL led her small rescue party through the abandoned mining tunnels beneath the town. Harold Wilson shuffled ahead, ancient lantern casting weak yellow light on walls that hadn't seen human presence in decades. Courthouse should be directly above us now, Harold whispered, pointing to a timber support beam. See that marking? Mason's guild symbol from when we built the foundation. ITEL nodded, signaling the warriors to prepare. Her side ached where her wound had barely healed, but she kept her discomfort hidden. Warriors showed no weakness, especially female warriors, who had fought twice as hard for recognition. How many guards? She asked, checking Ezekiel's revolver. Saw 4 outside when I left, Harold replied. Probably more inside. Blackwood's keeping his most trusted men close. Remember plan, ITEL reminded them. Free hostages first. No fighting unless necessary. Use fear and confusion. The 2 warriors, Running Elk and Stone Knife, nodded solemnly. Both had fought in the conflicts of the 1860s before the treaty. Both understood stealth warfare better than most army scouts. Harold led them to a rusted iron door, its hinges frozen with age. Old jail entrance, he explained. They walled this off when they built the new cells. Together they forced the door open, its protest mercifully muffled by layers of earth above. Beyond lay the courthouse's original holding cells, abandoned but intact. Martha said they are keeping hostages in the new cells, Harold whispered, 1 floor up. ITEL took the lead, her height allowing her to see over obstacles in the dim passageway. Despite her size, she moved with practiced silence, a skill learned during years of hunting in canyon country. They reached a stairwell, stone steps worn by decades of use. Voices drifted down, Blackwood's men, laughing and playing cards, unaware of what approached from below. ITEL gestured for silence, then whispered the plan once more. They would use Navajo hunting medicine, a mixture of tactics and psychology that had allowed her people to survive against overwhelming odds for generations. First came confusion. Running Elk moved to the far end of the basement, lighting small bundles of sage and cedar. The aromatic smoke would drift upward through air vents, creating a distraction. Next came fear. Stone Knife removed a rawhide drum from his pack, positioning himself near the old jail's echo chamber, a quirk of construction that would amplify sound throughout the building. Finally came action. ITEL handed Harold a small mirror and the lantern. When drum starts, use light signals, like we practiced. The old man nodded nervously, his arthritic hands steady despite his fear. His wife's life depended on his performance. ITEL took a deep breath, centering herself as her father had taught her. Then she nodded to Stone Knife. The drum began, not loud but insistent, a heartbeat rhythm that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the courthouse's stone foundation. Above, the card game stopped. Footsteps moved across the floor as guards investigated the strange sound. "What the hell is that?" a voice demanded. "Probably just the wind," another answered, uncertainty evident. The drum quickened slightly. Harold tilted his mirror, sending dancing light patterns up the stairwell. "There's smoke coming through the floor," someone shouted. "Fire! Check the prisoners." Boots pounded as guards rushed to investigate, exactly as Itel had predicted. White men feared fire in wooden buildings above all else. She signaled Running Elk forward. The warrior silently ascended the stairs, a master of moving unseen. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited for his signal. The drum continued its hypnotic rhythm, keeping the guards off balance and distracted. Finally, Running Elk's sow call echoed down. The way was clear. Itel led Harold up the stairs, Ezekiel's revolver ready. They emerged into a dimly lit corridor. Two guards lay unconscious, bound with their own belts. Running Elk stood by the cell block door, keys in hand. "4 guards," he reported softly, 2 patrolling outside still. Through the iron-barred door, Itel saw the hostages, 22 people crowded into 3 cells, including Martha Wilson and several children. The newspaper editor's silver hair was unmistakable, even in the poor light. "Harold!" Martha gasped as they entered, then clapped a hand over her mouth. Itel motioned for silence as Running Elk unlocked the cells. "Move quietly," she instructed the hostages. "Children in middle, adults outside. Follow old tunnel to canyon." Martha approached, remarkably composed despite her ordeal. "Blackwood's in his office upstairs with Marshal Kane. They're expecting Ezekiel to attempt a trade at dawn." "No trade," Itel assured her. "Ezekiel rides for Tucson with evidence." Relief flooded Martha's face. "Thank God, we heard about Cooper and Davis. Blackwood's been bragging about controlling the territorial government now." Stone Knife appeared in the doorway, urgency in his expression. "Riders coming, many horses." Itel made an instant decision. "Harold, take them out. Running Elk, guide them to safety." "What about you?" Harold asked. "I create distraction." She checked Ezekiel's revolver. "Meet at Wilson Ranch tomorrow." Martha squeezed her husband's arm. "She's right, Harold. They'll need time to escape." As the hostages filed out toward the tunnel, Idol moved upstairs with Stone Knife. From the courthouse windows, they saw mounted men approaching, at least 20 riders heavily armed. "Reinforcements from Phoenix," Stone Knife observed. Blackwood called for help. Itel's mind raced through options. The hostages needed at least 15 minutes to reach the tunnel entrance and escape into the darkness. "We make them think attack comes from outside," she decided. "Draw them away from building." Stone Knife smiled grimly, like hunting deer away from waterhole. They moved quickly to Blackwood's office on the upper floor, finding it empty but littered with evidence of hasty planning. Maps of the Navajo reservation with gold deposits marked, legal documents awarding land rights to Arizona Western Railroad. Itel took a moment to memorize what she saw, then collected several papers that looked important. Information was power. Her father had taught her that lesson well. Stone Knife had already gathered lamp oil from a storage closet. He splashed it over curtains and furniture, creating the illusion of a larger fire than they intended to start. From below came shouts as the riders entered the courthouse yard. "Marshal Kane, we got your telegram. Where's Blackwood?" Through the window, Itel spotted Kane emerging from the hotel across the street, Blackwood beside him. "Perfect timing," the marshal called. "We're expecting trouble at dawn. Marsh and his Indian friends think we'll trade hostages." Now was their moment. Stone Knife struck a match, igniting a small, controlled fire near the window. Flames leapt up dramatically as casting menacing shadows against the curtains. Simultaneously, Itel fired Ezekiel's revolver twice into the air. "Indians attacking!" she shouted in her deepest voice. "The prisoners!" The effect was instantaneous. The courtyard erupted in chaos as Blackwood's men scrambled for positions, firing wildly at shadows. Kane shouted orders, directing men to surround the building. "Let's move," Itel whispered. They slipped down the back stairs as the courthouse front door burst open, armed men rushing in to find empty cells and confused guards just regaining consciousness. Blackwood's enraged voice carried clearly. "Find them! Every one of them! $1,000 for each Indian brought to me alive." Itel and Stone Knife disappeared into the tunnel, pulling the ancient door closed behind them. By the time Blackwood's men thought to check the basement, they would be miles away and the hostages safely hidden at outlying ranches. Their mission accomplished, but the war had only just begun. Dawn found Ezekiel and Ayanna 70 miles southeast of Prescott, riding hard through desert country. Their Navajo escorts, brothers named Long Walker and Eagle Eye, led them on ancient trails unknown to white settlers, avoiding main roads where Blackwood might have placed informants. They had ridden through the night, stopping only to rest the horses. Now, as the sun crested the eastern mountains, they paused in a sheltered canyon to water their mounts and check the map. "Still 3 days to Tucson if we keep this pace," Ezekiel observed, passing a canteen to Ayanna. She drank sparingly, then surveyed the horizon with practiced eyes. "Blackwood will have telegraphed ahead. Every town will watch for us." "That's why we avoid towns," Eagle Eye interjected, securing a loose saddle strap. "Follow old paths, springs known only to Navajo." Long Walker, the more taciturn of the brothers, suddenly raised his hand for silence. He inclined his head, listening to something beyond normal hearing range. "Riders," he announced, "coming fast. 6, maybe 8. Ezekiel reached for Sullivan's field glass, scanning the ridge they had descended an hour earlier. Dust clouds confirmed Long Walker's assessment, mounted men following their trail. "How?" Ayanna demanded. "These paths are secret." "Tracker," Eagle Eye suggested grimly. "Apache scouts work for armies sometimes. For money, they track anyone." Ezekiel focused the glass more carefully. "Not army," he reported. "No uniforms. Blackwood's men." "They must have followed us from the canyon hideout," Ayanna concluded. "Kept their distance until dawn." "We ride," Long Walker decided. "Cannot fight 8 men in open." They mounted quickly, heading deeper into increasingly rugged terrain. Eagle Eye led them through narrow canyons and dry washes that would have been impassable during rainy seasons. By midday, the pursuit had fallen back but not disappeared. Every time Ezekiel thought they had lost them, dust clouds would appear on a distant ridge. "They're driving us east," he realized finally, "away from the Tucson road." Ayanna nodded grimly, "into Apache territory, where they can kill us and blame hostile tribe." As if confirming her assessment, rifle fire cracked from a ridge to their left. Bullets kicked dust 30 yards ahead, a warning, not a serious attempt to hit them. "They herd us like cattle," Long Walker observed bitterly. Ezekiel studied their options. To the south lay open desert. They would be exposed to rifle fire with no cover. East led into Apache lands, where neither Navajo nor white man would be welcome. North meant returning toward Prescott. West, he decided, pointing toward a steep canyon wall. "They won't expect us to double back." "Too steep for horses," Eagle Eye objected. "Not there." Ezekiel indicated a game trail barely visible among the rocks. "Deer path. I've hunted these canyons." Long Walker studied the route, then nodded approval. "Good eye. We'll slow them down." They urged their tired mounts up the treacherous path, loose stones clattering beneath iron-shod hooves. Behind them, shouts indicated their pursuers had spotted the maneuver. Halfway up the slope, a rifle barked. Eagle Eye's horse screamed, stumbling as blood blossomed on its shoulder. The Navajo warrior leapt clear as the animal fell, rolling to safety behind a boulder. "Keep going," he shouted to the others. "I slow them down." Ayanna pulled her mount alongside Ezekiel's. "We cannot leave him." "He's right," Ezekiel replied grimly. "Documents must reach Tucson. Everything depends on it." Long Walker had already dismounted, tossing his reins to Ezekiel. "My brother stays. I stay," he stated simply, taking position beside Eagle Eye. Ezekiel wanted to argue, but the warriors' expressions made clear their decision was final. This was Navajo honor. Brothers stood together. "We'll send help," he promised, knowing how empty the words sounded. Eagle Eye checked his rifle. "Go, reach Judge. Make Blackwood pay for all of this." Ayanna clasped her fist to her chest in the Navajo warrior salute. "Ride with honor, brothers." With leaden hearts, they continued up the trail, leading Long Walker's horse behind them. Rifle fire echoed through the canyon as the brothers engaged their pursuers, buying precious time with their lives. At the canyon's rim, Ezekiel paused for one last look. The Navajo warriors had established positions among the rocks, forcing Blackwood's men to dismount and approach on foot. 2 pursuers already lay motionless on the slope. "They will die with honor," Ayanna said quietly. "Honor won't stop Blackwood," Ezekiel replied, bitterness edging his voice. Only justice will. They rode west, then south, using the high ground to spot any further pursuit. By nightfall, they had covered another 30 miles, finding shelter in an abandoned prospector's cabin hidden among pinyon pines. While Ayana gathered firewood, Ezekiel tended the exhausted horses. Long Walker's mount, a sturdy buckskin gelding, nudged his shoulder gently. "I know," Ezekiel murmured, stroking the animal's neck. "I miss them too." Inside the cabin, they risked a small fire, enough to boil coffee but not large enough to be visible from a distance. Ezekiel checked Cooper's documents again, ensuring they remained intact despite the hard riding. "Will white man's justice truly punish Blackwood?" Ayanna asked, watching him handle the papers. "Judge Hollister has a reputation for integrity," Ezekiel replied. "If anyone will listen, he will. And if he doesn't?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. "Then we try another way," Ezekiel said finally. "But I won't let Blackwood win. Not after what he's done." Ayanna studied him in the firelight, her regal features thoughtful. "You fight for your land. Why?" "It's all I have left," he answered honestly. "After Sarah and Thomas died, after losing the Pennsylvania farm, that piece of Arizona dirt became everything." "Land is not owned," Ayanna said, echoing her father's words. "Land is borrowed from future generations," Ezekiel finished. "Your father told me it's a good way to think about it. You understand, then, why we cannot let Blackwood take our sacred grounds?" "I understand." Ezekiel sipped his coffee. "Funny thing is, my land isn't worth much. Poor soil, barely enough water. But it's mine. I worked it, bled for it. Small gold deposit makes it worth much to Blackwood," Ayanna observed shrewdly. Ezekiel glanced up in surprise. "How did you know about that?" "Saw same quartz formation on our land, where Blackwood most wants to build railroad." "I found it last spring," Ezekiel admitted. "Small vein in the north pasture. Not enough to make a man rich, but enough to interest Blackwood." "Gold brings only trouble," Ayanna said with conviction. "Makes men forget what truly matters." They fell silent, listening to the night sounds of the Arizona wilderness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, a lonesome sound that emphasized their isolation. "We should rest," Ezekiel suggested finally. "Still 2 days hard ride to Tucson." Ayanna nodded but made no move toward the cabin's crude bunk. "Long journey ahead, many enemies between us and justice." Her words held a weight beyond their immediate situation. Ezekiel sensed she was speaking about the broader struggle between their peoples, the long, painful history of broken promises and cultural misunderstanding. "We'll get through," he said, meeting her eyes across the dying fire. "Together." For the first time since he'd known her, Ayanna smiled fully, a transformation that softened her warrior's countenance into something unexpectedly gentle. "Together," she agreed. Morning brought unwelcome discovery. Their horses, exhausted from the previous day's hard ride, showed signs of lameness. Only Long Walker's buckskin remained sound enough to continue at pace. "We'll have to alternate," Ezekiel decided after examining his limping bay. "One rides while the other walks, switch every hour." Ayanna shook her head. "Too slow. Blackwood's men will catch us before Tucson." "What alternative do we have?" She pointed west, where purple mountains rose from the desert floor. "San Carlos Apache Reservation, 20 miles. They have telegraph office at agency." "Apache?" Ezekiel questioned. "They're not exactly friendly to either Navajo or white settlers." "Better chance than outrunning fresh horses with lame ones," Ayanna countered practically. "Agency has army protection. Can telegraph Judge Hollister from there." Ezekiel considered their options. The Apache and Navajo had a complicated history, sometimes allies, more often rivals. But Ayanna was right about the telegraph. If they could send Cooper's evidence ahead, even capture by Blackwood's men wouldn't completely destroy their mission. "Worth the risk," he decided finally. "But we keep the documents with us until we're certain the telegram goes through." They set out westward, Ayanna riding first while Ezekiel led the other horses. The morning heat built quickly, the Arizona sun merciless even in early hours. By noon, they had covered nearly 10 miles. Good progress considering their circumstances. Ezekiel now rode while Ayanna walked beside, her long stride easily keeping pace with the walking horse. Riders, she said suddenly, pointing south. Ezekiel saw them immediately. 3 horsemen moving parallel to their course, maintaining distance but clearly tracking them. Blackwood's men? No, Ayana replied, shading her eyes. Different riding style. Apache scouts, I think. They've spotted us already, Ezekiel noted. No point trying to hide. We continue. Show peaceful intentions. The Apache riders maintained their distance throughout the afternoon, sometimes disappearing only to reappear on another ridge. By late day, as San Carlos Agency came into view in the valley below, 6 riders shadowed them. The agency itself appeared as a collection of whitewashed buildings surrounded by Apache dwellings, a forced settlement where once nomadic people now lived under government supervision. An American flag flew above the agent's office, and several blue uniformed soldiers could be seen patrolling the perimeter. As they descended toward the valley, the Apache scouts finally approached directly. 6 warriors armed with army carbines, their faces impassive. White man and Navajo woman, their leader observed in accented English. Strange companions. We seek telegraph office, Ezekiel explained, keeping his hands visible. Urgent government business. The leader studied them skeptically, noting their exhausted condition and trail-worn appearance. Government business? He repeated. You have papers? Ezekiel hesitated, then produced Sullivan's dispatch pouch. Military communications for Fort Lowell. The Apache examined the pouch without touching it, recognizing the official markings. Many men looking for you, T. said, Emerald. White men with money. Offer rewards. Ezekiel's heart sank. Blackwood's influence had reached even here. They are dishonest men, Ayana interjected in formal Apache, a diplomatic language she had learned from her father. They steal land from both white settlers and native peoples. The scouts exchanged surprised glances at hearing their language from a Navajo. Agent will decide, their leader announced, gesturing toward the agency. Follow. They had no choice but to comply, riding between the Apache escorts into the settlement. Curious eyes watched from doorways. Agency Apaches who rarely saw Navajo visitors, especially one as imposing as Ayana. At the agency office, they dismounted. A harried-looking white man emerged, the Indian agent, John Harper, known throughout the territory for his relatively fair treatment of the Apache. What's this? He demanded, eyeing Ezekiel and Ayana with suspicion. Traveler seeking telegraph, Agent Harper, the lead scout reported. Harper studied them more carefully. You look familiar, he said to Ezekiel. Wait, aren't you Marsh, from north of Prescott? I am, Ezekiel confirmed. We need to send an urgent telegram to Judge Hollister in Tucson. Harper's expression darkened. You're the one they're looking for. There's a territorial warrant out for your arrest, harboring hostiles, interference with federal officers, suspicion of murder. All false charges, Ezekiel insisted. Jacob Blackwood fabricated them to prevent us from exposing his corruption. Blackwood? Harper's attitude shifted subtly. That railroad man? The same. He's attempting to seize land illegally, both from settlers and the Navajo. Harper hesitated, then gestured them inside, away from curious onlookers. I've had my own run-ins with Blackwood's company, he admitted once the door closed. Tried to bribe me to misreport Apache reservation boundaries last year. Hope flickered in Ezekiel's chest. Then you understand what we're facing. I understand Blackwood's tactics, Harper agreed cautiously. But that doesn't explain why you're traveling with a Navajo woman while a territorial warrant names you in connection with deaths of federal officials. Briefly, Ezekiel explained the events in Prescott, Cooper's investigation, Blackwood's corruption, the violence that erupted when the truth threatened to emerge. Harper listened intently, his bureaucratic demeanor giving way to genuine concern. I knew Davis, he said when Ezekiel finished. Honest man, one of the few in territorial government. He turned to Ayana. And you are? Ayana, daughter of Chief Nalish, she replied with dignity. We carry evidence of Blackwood's crimes against both our peoples. Harper paced the small office, weighing his options. The telegraph operator works for the Army, he said finally. Anything you send will be recorded, possibly intercepted if Blackwood has influence with the Territorial Telegraph Office. We have no choice, Ezekiel insisted. Judge Hollister needs to see these documents. There might be another way, Harper suggested. Army courier leaves for Fort Lowell tomorrow morning. Military dispatches go directly to Tucson, bypassing territorial authorities. Can we trust this courier? Ayanna asked skeptically. Lieutenant Reynolds? Yes. He's had his own conflicts with territorial politics. Harper lowered his voice. His brother was a mining engineer who died in that Flagstaff collapse last year. Blackwood's mine. Another victim of Blackwood's ruthless business practices. The man left destruction wherever he operated. We need safe haven until morning, Ezekiel said. Blackwood's men are still tracking us. Harper nodded grimly. I can arrange that. There's a missionary dwelling on agency grounds, empty since the Methodist minister left last month. What about our evidence reaching Judge Hollister? Ayanna pressed. I'll introduce you to Reynolds tonight, Harper promised. Let him decide if he'll carry your documents. As Harper led them toward the missionary's cabin, Ezekiel felt the weight of their journey in every muscle. They had lost Eagle Eye and Long Walker, ridden their horses to exhaustion, and still faced uncertain reception in Tucson. Yet for the first time since leaving Prescott, he sensed they might actually succeed. That hope proved devastatingly premature. Lieutenant James Reynolds proved receptive to their cause, examining Cooper's documents with increasing anger as he recognized the scale of Blackwood's corruption. My brother warned about unsafe conditions in that mine, he told them, carefully returning the papers to their pouch. Blackwood had him transferred to a different site just before the collapse. Always suspected it wasn't coincidence. Will you carry these to Judge Hollister? Ezekiel asked. Reynolds nodded firmly. Directly into his hands. No intermediaries. We should travel with you, Ayanna suggested. Our testimony strengthens the evidence. Too dangerous, Reynolds countered. My patrol has official authorization. You'd be arrested immediately if recognized. Harper, who had arranged the meeting in his private quarters, agreed reluctantly. Better to send the documents ahead. You can follow once we know Judge Hollister has received them. Though frustrated by further delay, Ezekiel recognized the wisdom of their advice. When do you leave? Dawn patrol, Reynolds replied. We'll reach Tucson by tomorrow evening. They finalized arrangements for the documents transfer, then returned to the missionary cabin where they would spend the night. The small structure offered little comfort but considerable privacy, exactly what they needed after days on the trail. Ayanna inspected the simple dwelling critically. Strange house for holy man, she observed, examining the sparse furnishings. Navajo medicine people live better. Ezekiel smiled despite their circumstances. Methodist missionaries take vows of simplicity. Strange religion, she concluded, but settled onto the narrow cot with evident relief. Ezekiel built a small fire in the cabin's wood stove, the evening chill already seeping through adobe walls. Outside, normal agency activities continued. Apache families preparing evening meals, soldiers changing guard, the rhythms of a community under constant supervision. Do you think Itel succeeded? Ayanna asked suddenly. With hostage rescue? The question had haunted Ezekiel throughout their journey. Your sister is formidable, he replied carefully. If anyone could manage it, she could. But you worry. Yes. There seemed no point denying it. Blackwood is ruthless. And if he discovered the rescue attempt, Ayanna nodded grimly, he would show no mercy. They fell silent, each lost in private concerns for those left behind. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on them both, not just for friends and family, but for the future of two peoples whose lands and lives hung in the balance. We should rest, Ezekiel suggested finally. Tomorrow brings its own challenges. Ayanna agreed, stretching her tall frame as comfortably as possible on the too-short cot. Ezekiel prepared to sleep on the floor near the stove, having insisted she take the only proper bed. Sleep came fitfully, disrupted by occasional noises from the agency and their own anxious thoughts. Near midnight, Ezekiel woke fully at the sound of horses approaching, multiple riders moving quietly, without the usual calls and conversations of military patrol. He rose silently, peering through the cabin's small window. Moonlight revealed mounted figures at the agency's edge, at least a dozen riders, their approach deliberately stealthy. Ayanna, he whispered urgently, wake up. She was instantly alert, warrior's instincts overriding exhaustion. What happens? Riders, not military. He reached for his rifle. Get dressed quickly. Even as they prepared, a shout broke the night's stillness. Then gunfire erupted near the agent's office. Blackwood found us, Ayana concluded, securing her knife. Ezekiel checked the documents, ensuring the pouch remained intact. How? We covered our tracks. Before she could answer, rapid footsteps approached their cabin. They braced for attack, but it was Agent Harper who burst through the door, blood streaming from a scalp wound. Blackwood's men, he gasped, led by Marshal Kane himself. They've taken the agency office and telegraph. Reynolds is dead. Horror washed through Ezekiel. Dead? How? Shot while trying to defend the office. They knew exactly when to come. Someone informed them. Harper pressed a blood-soaked handkerchief to his head. The Apache are fighting back, but there's more raiders outside the perimeter. Gunfire intensified, the distinctive crack of Army carbines mixed with heavier civilian weapons. We need to leave, Ezekiel decided. Are our horses still in the agency stable? Harper nodded. South side, but you'll never reach them. Agency's surrounded. Ayana moved to the window, assessing the situation with practiced eyes. Apache are engaging raiders from eastern buildings. Western approach temporarily clear. There's a supply wagon behind the storehouse, Harper suggested. Monthly provisions arrived yesterday. Driver sleeps in town, returns tomorrow. That's our way out, Ezekiel concluded. What about the documents? Ayana asked. Reynolds was our best hope. Ezekiel thought quickly. We take them with us. Find another way to Tucson. Harper shook his head urgently. They'll be searching for you specifically. Documents will never make it through. He held out his hand. Give them to me. I'll hide them here at the agency. If you escape, draw their pursuit away. How will we recover them? Ezekiel demanded. My assistant, Thomas Yazzie, half Apache, half white, knows these mountains better than anyone. If you can circle back in 3 days, he'll meet you at Cottonwood Spring with the documents. Another gunshot, much closer, emphasized the urgency of decision. We have no choice, Ezekiel concluded, handing over the precious pouch. Where exactly is Cottonwood Spring? Harper quickly described the location, a hidden water source in the mountains west of San Carlos. 3 days, he repeated. Yazzie will watch for you. Now go. I'll create distraction at the north gate. They slipped out the cabin's back window, staying low as they moved toward the agency storehouse. Around them, chaos reigned. Apache families fleeing burning buildings, soldiers attempting to organize defense, Blackwood's raiders pushing deeper into the settlement. The supply wagon stood unattended behind the storehouse, a heavy Conestoga loaded with flour, coffee, and other provisions. 2 mules waited in harness, startled but manageable, as Ezekiel checked their tackle. I'll drive, he told Ayana. You watch for pursuit. She nodded, climbing aboard with rifle ready. Ezekiel released the brake and slapped the reins, sending the mules lurching forward along the western trail. They had barely cleared the agency perimeter when shouts erupted behind them. There, that's Marsh in the wagon! Gunfire followed immediately, bullets splintering wood around them as Ezekiel urged the mules to greater speed. The heavily laden wagon bounced violently over the rough track, threatening to overturn with each turn. 4 riders following, Ayana reported, returning fire carefully, Marshal Kane among them. Ezekiel risked a glance back. In the moonlight, he recognized Kane's distinctive hat and riding posture. The marshal had abandoned all pretense of law enforcement. Now he was simply Blackwood's enforcer, determined to eliminate the last threats to his employer's schemes. We need to reach the canyon ahead, Ezekiel called over the wagon's rattle. Narrow passage. They'll have to ride single file. Ayana fired again, satisfaction evident as one pursuer tumbled from his saddle. 3 now. The mules, sensing danger, found reserves of strength. The wagon hurtled toward the canyon entrance, wheels dangerously close to the edge of the increasingly steep trail. Just as they entered the narrower passage, a bullet struck the wagon's rear axle. Wood splintered ominously, the left wheel wobbling with each rotation. Wheels going, Ezekiel warned. Be ready to jump. Ayana braced herself, still firing methodically at their pursuers. Another raider fell, clutching his shoulder. The damaged wheel separated completely as they rounded a sharp bend, sending the wagon crashing onto its side. Ezekiel was thrown clear, landing heavily among scrub brush. Ayana leapt moments before impact, rolling expertly to absorb the fall. Dazed but intact, Ezekiel scrambled toward a defensive position behind the overturned wagon. The mules, freed from their harness by the crash, galloped away into the night. You hit? He called to Ayana. No, she replied, crawling to join him. You? Nothing serious. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, but his limbs functioned properly. Behind them, hoofbeats approached cautiously. Marshal Kane and his remaining deputy had dismounted, using boulders for cover as they advanced. Marsh, Kane shouted. It's over. Surrender now, or we'll gun you down where you stand. Ezekiel checked his ammunition. 4 rounds remaining. Ayana had 3 in her rifle. 7 shots against 2 experienced gunmen. Poor odds. What about Cooper's documents? Kane continued. Hand them over, and maybe Blackwood lets you live. Ezekiel exchanged glances with Ayana. If Kane was asking for the documents, he didn't know they'd been left with Harper. No answer? Kane called. Fine. We do this the hard way. Concentrated fire struck the wagon, forcing Ezekiel and Ayana lower behind their deteriorating cover. They'll flank us soon, Ezekiel warned. Ayana nodded grimly. One chance. Darkness, higher ground. She pointed upslope where rocky outcroppings offered better defensive positions, if they could reach them. Cover me, Ezekiel directed. I'll draw their fire. Then you run. I'll follow. Together, she countered firmly. On 3. Before he could argue, she began counting. At 3, both fired simultaneously at the marshal's position, then sprinted toward the rocks. Bullets kicked dust at their heels as Kane and his deputy recovered from the surprise. Ezekiel felt a sharp burn across his ribs, a bullet's graze rather than a direct hit. They reached the first outcropping, throwing themselves behind its protective bulk as more shots rang out. Keep moving, Ayana urged. Higher ground. They scrambled upward, using natural cover to shield their progress. Behind them, Kane and the deputy followed more cautiously, hampered by unfamiliarity with the terrain. At a small plateau halfway up the canyon wall, Ezekiel paused to catch his breath. Blood soaked his shirt where the bullet had grazed him, but adrenaline masked the pain. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they catch up, he estimated. Ayana studied the landscape with a tracker's eye. There, she pointed to a narrow crevice among the rocks above. Natural fortress, good sight lines, difficult approach. They had nearly reached it when a shot rang out from an unexpected direction, above them. The deputy had circled around, gaining the high ground. Ezekiel felt the impact before he heard the shot. A sledgehammer blow to his left shoulder that spun him around and dropped him to his knees. Pain exploded through his chest, breath suddenly impossible to find. Ayana fired upward, forcing the deputy back into cover. Then she was beside Ezekiel, her strong arms supporting him as consciousness wavered. Stay awake, she commanded. Few more steps. Through a haze of pain, he felt himself half-dragged into the rock crevice. Ayana propped him against stone, examining his wound with swift efficiency. Clean through, she reported. Missing bone, much blood, though. Ezekiel tried to focus on her face, fighting the darkness that threatened to engulf him. You should go, he managed. Find help, complete the mission. Quiet, she replied firmly, tearing strips from her dress to bind the wound. Navajo do not abandon allies. Outside their shelter, Marshal Kane's voice carried clearly in the night air. It's over, Marsh. Blackwood's won. The Army's mobilizing against the Navajo reservation tomorrow. Your Indian friends will be too busy fighting for survival to worry about land rights. The terrible announcement penetrated even Ezekiel's pain-fogged mind. While they had pursued justice through legal means, Blackwood had orchestrated the ultimate solution. Military force to crush all opposition. Chief Nalish, he whispered. Your people. Father will protect them, Ayana replied, though worry shadowed her features. First we survived this night. As if punctuating her determination, a new sound echoed through the canyon, war cries, distinctly Apache, followed by renewed gunfire. What's happening? Ezekiel asked weakly. Ayana peered cautiously from their shelter. Apache warriors, she reported with grim satisfaction. Agency fighters following raiders. Kane and deputy retreating. The gunfire intensified briefly, then diminished. Minutes later, silence reclaimed the canyon. Are they gone? Ezekiel asked, struggling to remain conscious. For now, Ayana confirmed, but we cannot stay here. Army will investigate by morning. Ezekiel knew she was right. If they were found near the scene of violence, no explanation would save them from immediate arrest. Or worse, Summary execution as hostile Indians and renegades. Help me up, he requested, gathering his remaining strength. Ayana supported his weight as they emerged from the crevice. Dawn light revealed the canyon below, the overturned wagon, Marshal Kane's horse standing riderless near the entrance. Kane escaped, Ayana observed. Deputy did not. She pointed to a still form sprawled among the rocks. Ezekiel surveyed their situation with fading clarity. They had lost the documents, their transportation, and now his wounds severely limited their mobility. Blackwood's forces controlled the agency behind them, and unknown dangers lay ahead. We need to reach Cottonwood Spring, he said, each word an effort. 3 days. Harper's man will bring documents. First needs safe place, Ayana countered practically. Your wound requires medicine. She guided him carefully down a game trail leading west, away from both the agency and Prescott. Ezekiel focused on placing one foot before the other, fighting the darkness that threatened with each step. As consciousness finally slipped away, his last awareness was of Ayana's strong arms catching him, and her voice commanding, uncompromising. Live, Ezekiel Marsh. Justice not finished yet. Darkness surrounded Ezekiel, broken by occasional flashes of firelight. Voices drifted through his fever, some familiar, others strange. At times he thought he heard Sarah calling him, or his son Thomas laughing as he had before the influenza took them both. Other moments brought battlefield echoes, the screams of dying men at Antietam, officers shouting contradictory orders through gunsmoke. Through it all, one voice remained constant, deep and steady, speaking words he couldn't understand but found comfort in nonetheless. Ayana's voice anchoring him to life when death seemed easier. Consciousness returned in fragments. First came awareness of pain, his shoulder burning as though branded. Then tactile sensations, rough blankets beneath him, cool cloth on his forehead. Finally, sight returned as he forced heavy eyelids open. He lay in a small cave, its entrance partially covered by brush. A modest fire burned nearby, its smoke channeled upward through a natural chimney in the rock. Beside it sat Ayana, grinding something in a stone mortar. You wake, she observed without looking up. Good, fever breaks. Ezekiel tried to speak, but his throat produced only a dry croak. Ayana moved to his side, supporting his head as she offered a water-filled gourd. How long? He managed after drinking. 2 days, she replied. Bullet wound became infected. Navajo medicine helped, but spirit journey was yours alone. 2 days. The realization hit with devastating clarity. They had missed the rendezvous with Harper's man at Cottonwood Spring. The documents, he whispered. Rest now, Ayana instructed firmly. When stronger, we make new plan. Despite his urgency, exhaustion dragged him back toward sleep. As consciousness faded, he felt Ayana's cool hand on his forehead. A warrior's touch turned gentle. When Ezekiel woke again, evening shadows filled the cave. His mind was clearer, the fever gone, though weakness remained. He managed to push himself into a sitting position, wincing as the movement pulled at his bandaged shoulder. Stubborn, Ayana commented, entering the cave with an armful of firewood. Like wounded wolf that will not stay in den. Where are we? He asked, taking in their surroundings more carefully. Apache hunting territory, 20 miles west of San Carlos. She arranged wood on the fire with practiced efficiency. Safe for now. Blackwood's men search areas east, thinking we flee toward Tucson. We missed the meeting at Cottonwood Spring. Ayana nodded. Yes, but Harper's man may wait longer, knowing agency attack delayed us. Hope flickered briefly, then reality reasserted itself. Even if we recover the documents, getting them to Judge Hollister seems impossible now. Every law officer in the territory will be watching for us. Perhaps. Ayana sat cross-legged beside the fire, her imposing height somehow diminished by the cave's dimensions. But Apache scouts bring news. Blackwood's victory not complete. What news? Hostages escaped Prescott. Martha Wilson publishes newspaper again from ranch, telling truth about Blackwood. Many settlers angry about agency attack. Apache were peaceful, under government protection. Ezekiel absorbed this information gratefully. Any tell? Your father? No word yet. A shadow crossed Ayana's face. But father is wise. will not rush into war Blackwood wants. She offered him a wooden bowl containing a thick stew. Eat. Strength returns faster with food. The meal, rabbit and wild onions, seasoned with unfamiliar herbs, tasted better than anything Ezekiel could remember. As he ate, Ayana described the past 2 days, how she had carried him to this cave after he collapsed, how she had treated his wound with poultices made from plants gathered in the surrounding hills. You saved my life, he acknowledged when she finished. You would do same, she replied simply. Alliance means nothing if abandoned and when tested. Her matter-of-fact response exemplified the Navajo worldview he had come to respect. Obligations were not extraordinary acts, but expected behavior between honorable people. Tomorrow I scout Cottonwood Spring, Ayana continued. If Harper's man waited, we retrieve documents. If not, we find another way. I'm coming with you. She assessed his condition skeptically. Wound still weak, journey difficult. I've ridden with worse, Ezekiel insisted. During the war, I spent 3 days in the saddle with a mini-ball in my leg. No horses, Ayana pointed out practically. They ran during canyon fight. Then I'll walk. He met her gaze steadily. This is my fight too, Ayana. I won't be left behind. Something shifted in her expression. Respect, perhaps, or understanding of the pride that drove him. Very well, we leave at dawn. Leave. Blah. First light found them moving carefully through Pinon juniper forest, following game trails that wound through increasingly mountainous terrain. Ezekiel's shoulder throbbed with each step, but the pain remained manageable, testament to Ayana's healing skills. She moved ahead of him, her height and strength allowing her to set a pace that challenged his recovery without overwhelming it. Occasionally she would pause, examining tracks or broken vegetation with a tracker's precision. Someone passed recently, she noted during one such stop. Single rider, heavy horse. Blackwood's men? She shook her head. Different. Horse wears army shoes, but rider sits like Apache. Her expression brightened slightly. Could be Harper's man, Thomas Yazzie. They continued with renewed purpose, climbing steadily toward a rocky ridge. Beyond it, according to Ayana's mental map, lay Cottonwood Spring, a hidden water source known primarily to local tribes. As they crested the ridge, Ezekiel's breath caught. Below stretched a small valley of surprising beauty, a green oasis amid the arid landscape. A clear spring emerged from rocky outcroppings, creating a shallow pool before continuing downslope as a modest stream. Cottonwood trees, their leaves shimmering silver green in the morning light, provided welcome shade. No sign of anyone, he observed, scanning the clearing. Wait, Ayana cautioned, pointing to a particular cottonwood. Message sign. Ezekiel followed her gaze to a distinctive mark carved into the tree's trunk, a simple cross with a vertical line beneath it. Apache trail sign, Ayana explained, means return after sun crosses sky twice. 2 days, Ezekiel translated. Someone was here, left instructions to return. Yazzie, Ayana confirmed confidently. No one else would use this sign in this place. They descended to the spring, grateful for its cool water after their arduous journey. While Ayana checked the perimeter for additional signs, Ezekiel examined the carved message more carefully. There's something else here, he called, noticing smaller markings beneath the primary symbol. Letters. Ayana joined him, tracing the tiny script with her finger. T.Y., Thomas Yazzie, and numbers, 8-5. August 5th, Ezekiel reasoned. That's tomorrow. He waits one more day, Ayana concluded. Knows we were delayed. Relief washed through Ezekiel. They had not lost their chance after all. We camp here tonight, he decided. Meet Yazzie tomorrow. Ayana agreed, though her expression remained cautious. Must maintain watch, place too perfect for ambush. They established a small camp in a defensible position with clear sightlines to all approaches. As evening approached, Ayana demonstrated her hunting prowess, returning with 2 rabbits for their supper. Under normal circumstances, Ezekiel would have felt diminished by his inability to contribute equally to their survival. Instead, he found himself admiring her capabilities without resentment, a partnership of complementary strengths rather than competition. You learned hunting from your father? He asked as they ate. Yes. Father believed daughters should know all skills, not just women's work. Pride colored her voice. I was first female admitted to warrior training. ITEL followed next year. That couldn't have been easy, Ezekiel observed, changing traditions. Many opposed, said women too emotional for war, too weak for hunting. She smiled slightly. Father told them to fight me if they doubted. Few accepted challenge after first try. Ezekiel could well imagine. Ayana's height and strength would intimidate most men, regardless of culture. Your people have adapted to tremendous changes, he noted. Reservation life must be difficult after centuries of freedom. An adaptation is survival, she replied philosophically. Navajo have always taken best from other peoples. Farming from Pueblo, silver work from Mexicans, horse culture from Spanish. Now we learn white man's words, white man's laws. Her expression hardened. But we keep our core, our connection to land, to ancestors. That's what Blackwood doesn't understand, Ezekiel said. He sees land only as commodity, something to buy and sell for profit. Many white men think this way, Ayana observed without rancor. Strange concept to us. How can you sell what was here before you? What will remain after you? The question echoed Ezekiel's own evolving relationship with his ranch. What had begun as simple ownership, a desperate grab for security after losing everything in Pennsylvania, had become something deeper. The land had changed him as much as he had changed it. I used to think that way too, he admitted. Saw my ranch as property, something I owned completely. Now, he struggled to articulate the transformation. Now I understand it's more like a trust, borrowed from the future. Ayana nodded, approval warming her normally stoic features. This wisdom will save your people, if enough learn it. Their conversation continued as night descended, ranging from philosophical to practical matters. Ezekiel described his experiences during the Civil War, the horrors he'd witnessed, but also the brotherhood forged in combat. Ayana shared stories of Navajo resistance during the tribe's forced relocation known as the Long Walk, how her grandfather had hidden in sacred canyons, preserving ancient traditions until the people returned. For the first time since Sarah's death, Ezekiel found himself opening completely to another person, not just sharing facts, but revealing the deeper currents of his life. Ayana listened with an intelligence and empathy that transcended cultural differences. As they prepared for sleep, dividing the night into watchful shifts, Ezekiel realized their journey had forged something beyond alliance or friendship. Whatever label might apply seemed inadequate for the bond developing between them, a connection born of shared struggle and mutual respect. Morning brought renewed vigilance as they awaited Thomas Yazzy's arrival. Ezekiel's shoulder had improved enough for limited use, though Ayana insisted on changing the bandages and applying fresh medicine. Heal clean, she pronounced, examining the wound. Good scar for stories. Another to add to the collection, Ezekiel replied wryly, indicating several older marks across his torso, souvenirs from Antietam and Gettysburg. Warriors wear history on skin, Ayana observed with understanding. Each scar, memory of survival. By midday, tension had built with no sign of Yazzie. They maintained careful watch from separate positions, communicating with hand signals Ayana had taught him. The distinctive sound of a horse's approach finally came in late afternoon, a single rider moving unhurriedly along the narrow trail leading to the spring. Thomas Yazzie proved younger than Ezekiel had expected, perhaps 30, with features that clearly showed his mixed heritage. He wore Army Scouts clothing, but carried himself with Apache dignity. "Mr. Marsh," he called, dismounting at a respectful distance. "Agent Harper said you might still come." "You have the documents?" Ezekiel asked directly. Yazzie nodded, patting his saddlebag. "Safe, though getting them to Tucson will be challenging. Army patrols have increased since the agency incident." "What news from San Carlos?" Ayana asked, emerging from her concealment. If Yazzie was surprised by her imposing presence, he concealed it well. "Agency recovering slowly. Harper wounded but alive. Military investigation underway. Officers from Fort Grant interviewing witnesses." "And Marshal Kane?" Ezekiel pressed. "Returned to Prescott with remaining raiders. Claims Apache attacked first, forcing defensive action." Yazzie's expression revealed his opinion of this version. Few believe him, but territorial officials publicly support his account. "Blackwood's influence," Ezekiel concluded bitterly. "Yes, though perhaps weakening." Yazzie reached into his jacket, withdrawing a folded newspaper. "Mrs. Wilson continues her campaign. Latest edition reached San Carlos yesterday. Ezekiel unfolded the Arizona Sentinel's emergency edition. Bold headlines proclaimed, Railroad Barons hired guns attack peaceful agency, federal investigator murdered. Martha Wilson's forthright reporting detailed the events in Prescott and subsequent violence at San Carlos, naming Blackwood directly as the orchestrator. Brave woman, Ayanna commented, reading over Ezekiel's shoulder. Blackwood will not forgive this. He's already tried silencing her, Yazzie confirmed. Sent men to the Wilson Ranch 2 days ago. Settlers and friendly Apache drove them off. What about the Navajo reservation? Ayanna asked urgently. Is there fighting? No military action yet. The attack on San Carlos complicated matters. Army hesitant to move against another tribe while investigating violence against the Apache. Relief flickered briefly in Ayanna's expression, though concern remained evident. My father? Any word? Chief Nalish sent diplomatic delegation to Fort Defiance, Yazzie reported, seeking peaceful resolution. Army commander agreed to postpone any action pending investigation. Blackwood must be furious, Ezekiel observed, his plans unraveling. He pushes harder now, Yazzie warned. Telegraph lines carry orders to complete railroad survey work immediately, regardless of unresolved land claims. Establishing facts on ground before legal challenges, Ezekiel translated grimly. Classic tactic. Yazzie nodded, then withdrew a sealed envelope from his saddlebag. Agent Harper said to give you this, Cooper's documents and his personal letter to Judge Hollister. Ezekiel accepted the package reverently, recognizing its importance. Now we just need to reach Tucson alive. About that, Yazzie said carefully, direct route remains heavily patrolled, but there's another way, old Apache trail through mountains. Difficult terrain, but invisible to Army or territorial authorities. How long? Ayanna asked practically. 5 days if you push hard. No horses possible. Some sections require climbing. Ezekiel considered their options. His shoulder had improved, but 5 days of mountain travel would test his endurance severely. Yet the alternative, regular roads with their patrols and informants, offered certain capture. Could you take the documents yourself? He asked Yazzie. As Army scout, you move freely. The young man shook his head regretfully. Tried already. Military telegraph alerted all outposts to watch for these specific documents. My saddlebags were searched twice between here and San Carlos. Only escaped discovery by keeping papers on my person. Then we have no choice, Ezekiel concluded. We take the mountain route. Yazzie studied him with concern. Your wound may not... I'll manage, Ezekiel interrupted firmly. We leave tomorrow, Ayanna decided, her tone allowing no argument. Tonight you rest. Build strength. Yazzie provided detailed instructions for the mountain route, drawing a rough map on a piece of bark. He also offered welcome supplies, jerky, coffee, ammunition for their limited weapons. One more thing, he added before departing. Strange rumor from Prescott. Marshal Kane quarreled with Blackwood after San Carlos raid. Some say Kane may break alliance. Why? Ezekiel asked skeptically. Kane's been Blackwood's puppet for years. Agency attack crossed line for him, Yazzie suggested. Killing soldiers, shooting federal agent. Or perhaps he seeks to save himself as Blackwood's schemes unravel. After Yazzie's departure, Ezekiel and Ayanna studied the crude map, planning their journey through unfamiliar mountains. Will be hard travel, Ayanna acknowledged. Your wound still heals. I won't slow us down, Ezekiel promised. She regarded him thoughtfully. Not concerned about pace. Concerned about reopening wound, infection returning. I've survived worse, he replied, attempting lightness. Yes, but unnecessary risk helps no one. She indicated the document pouch. These papers reach Tucson only if you remain healthy enough to testify. Her practical assessment dampened his pride. She was right. The mission's success depended not just on delivering papers, but on his ability to explain their significance to Judge Hollister. I'll be careful, he conceded, and tell you if the wound worsens. Satisfied with this compromise, Ayanna returned to preparation, checking their limited supplies, fashioning walking sticks for the mountain journey. That night, as Ezekiel took first watch, he found himself contemplating the complex chain of events that had brought him here. 3 weeks ago, he had been a solitary rancher struggling against drought and Blackwood's pressure tactics. Now he was a fugitive with a price on his head, partnered with a Navajo warrior woman, carrying evidence that could reshape territorial politics. The transformation seemed almost impossible, yet he couldn't imagine returning to his previous existence. Something fundamental had changed, not just in his circumstances, but in his understanding of his place in the wider world. When Ayana relieved him for the second watch, he surrendered to exhaustion, sleeping more soundly than he had in days. Dawn found them already moving, following Yazzy's map toward the mountain passage. The landscape changed gradually, pine forest giving way to steeper, rockier terrain as they climbed steadily eastward. By midday, they had reached the first significant challenge, a narrow ravine requiring careful descent on foot. Ayana led, demonstrating handholds and secure footing. Ezekiel followed, gritting his teeth against the pain in his shoulder when forced to support weight on his injured side. Slow, Ayana cautioned him when she noticed his struggle. No race, just getting started, he assured her, masking discomfort with determination. The day proceeded similarly, periods of reasonable travel interspersed with challenging passages that tested Ezekiel's recovery. By evening, they had covered perhaps 8 miles of actual distance, though the difficult terrain made it feel like 20. They camped in a protected hollow, too exhausted for more than minimal conversation. Ezekiel's shoulder throbbed mercilessly, though he concealed the worst of his discomfort from Ayana's observant gaze. Morning brought stiffness, but renewed resolve. The second day proved marginally easier as they adjusted to the rhythm of mountain travel. Ayana continued to lead, her natural athleticism and height advantages on the difficult terrain. Ezekiel found himself admiring her fluid movements, the way she instinctively found the best route through seemingly impassable sections. Near midday, they paused at a mountain stream to refill canteens. Ayana knelt, washing trail dust from her face. How far to Tucson? Ezekiel asked, consulting the crude map. 3 more days of weather holds, she estimated. Yazzy's route good. Avoid settlements, army paths. As she spoke, Ezekiel noticed movement on the ridge above them, a flash of color against stone. He raised his hand for silence, then gestured upward. Ayana saw it immediately, a mounted figure silhouetted against the sky, watching them. Without command, both dropped to protective positions, weapons ready. Apache? Ezekiel whispered. No, Ayana replied, studying the distant figure. Wrong blanket pattern, Navajo. Your people? This far south? Scouts, perhaps, watching for army movement. She hesitated, then made a decision. Standing fully exposed, she raised both arms in a traditional Navajo greeting, calling out words that Ezekiel didn't understand. The figure watched for long moments, then returned the gesture before disappearing behind the ridge. He recognized you? Ezekiel asked as they resumed their journey. Yes, we'll report to Father that we live. Head toward Tucson. A rare smile crossed her face. Good sign. Father extends protection even here. The encounter lifted their spirits, confirmation they weren't entirely alone in their mission. By evening, they had made better progress than expected, reaching a landmark Yazzie had described, twin peaks resembling a sleeping buffalo. Their camp that night felt almost comfortable, having found a sheltered overhang that provided natural protection. As they shared coffee boiled over a small fire, Ayana studied Ezekiel with characteristic directness. Shoulder pains you more than you admit, she observed. Denying it seemed pointless. It's manageable. Without further comment, she retrieved her medicine pouch, mixing a paste from various dried plants. Remove shirt, she instructed practically. Ezekiel complied, wincing as the fabric pulled away from inflamed skin around his wound. The bullet hole itself was healing cleanly, but surrounding tissue showed angry redness from the strain of their journey. Ayana's strong fingers worked the medicine into affected areas with surprising gentleness. Despite her size and strength, her touch held remarkable precision. Why did you never remarry? She asked unexpectedly. After Sarah died, the personal question surprised him. Never met anyone who made me consider it, he answered honestly. And then I came west, where good women are scarce. Many women in settlements, Ayana pointed out. Yes, but after losing Sarah and Thomas, he struggled to articulate the complex emotions. Something inside closed, easier to focus on survival on the ranch. Ayana nodded understanding. Grief builds walls, protection against future pain. What about you? Ezekiel asked, turning the conversation. No husband waiting at the reservation? A shadow crossed her face. Was betrothed once. Tall shadow, strong warrior, good man. Her hands continued their methodical work. Died during smallpox outbreak 4 winters ago. I'm sorry. Life continues, she said simply. Found purpose in protecting people, learning white man's ways to defend Navajo interests. She secured a fresh bandage over his wound. Hands that cannot hold loved ones can still hold weapons against enemies. The statement reflected such profound understanding of his own experience that Ezekiel felt momentarily speechless. They had walked vastly different paths, yet arrived at remarkably similar emotional destinations. We should rest, Ayana suggested, moving away to her sleeping position. Long climb tomorrow. Ezekiel settled beneath his blanket, Ayana's unexpected insight following him into uneasy dreams. The third day brought their greatest challenge, a section Yazzie had marked as Eagle's Path, requiring them to traverse a narrow ledge along a sheer cliff face. Hundreds of feet below, a river gleamed like a silver thread. No alternative route? Ezekiel asked, surveying the precarious passage. None shorter than 2-day detour, Ayana replied, studying Yazzie's map. Path safe if careful, Apache used for generations. Lead on then, he said, masking apprehension with determination. The crossing proceeded slowly, each step requiring full concentration. Handholds proved adequate, but sometimes required stretching that pulled painfully at Ezekiel's wound. Halfway across, a section of rock crumbled beneath his foot, leaving him momentarily suspended by his good arm. Ayana reacted instantly, securing his position with her remarkable strength until he regained footing. Nearly lost the documents there, he joked weakly, heart pounding from the near disaster. Nearly lost more than documents, she replied, her usually composed features showing genuine concern. They completed the crossing without further incident, reaching more manageable terrain by late afternoon. The day's exertion had taken visible toll on Ezekiel, his face pale, movements increasingly stiff. We rest here tonight, Ayana decided when they reached a suitable clearing. Easier travel tomorrow. Too exhausted to argue, Ezekiel helped establish camp to the extent his strength allowed. After a simple meal, he surrendered to exhaustion, sleeping immediately. Sometime in the night, fever returned, not as severe as before, but concerning nonetheless. Ayana noticed immediately during her watch, placing cool cloths on his forehead and administering herbal medicines that tasted of sage and juniper. By morning, the fever had receded, though weakness remained. Ayana studied him with professional assessment. 2 choices, she said directly. Slow pace, allow healing. Or continue push, reach Tucson faster but risk collapse. How much slower? Ezekiel asked practically. Perhaps 7 days instead of 5. He shook his head firmly. Too long. Blackwood's men completing survey work now. Once they've established route, legal challenges become harder. Your health, she began, is secondary to stopping Blackwood, he interrupted. We continue as planned. Ayana recognized the futility of argument, instead focusing on practical measures, lightening his pack, preparing strengthening medicines, finding the easiest possible route through difficult terrain. The day passed in determined progress, Ezekiel pushing through discomfort with grim persistence. By evening, they had descended significantly, mountain forests giving way to lower elevations dominated by saguaro cacti and mesquite. Tucson Valley tomorrow, Ayana noted as they made camp. Then greatest danger begins. Entering civilization again, Ezekiel agreed soberly. Many eyes watch for us, she confirmed. Need plan for final approach. They discussed options while sharing their dwindling supplies. Direct entry to Tucson seemed foolhardy. Blackwood would have informants watching every road. Yet Judge Hollister remained their only hope for justice. There's a Spanish mission south of town, Ezekiel remembered from previous travels. San Xavier del Bac. The priests there sometimes shelter travelers. Religious men help fugitives? Ayana asked skeptically. They follow different laws, Ezekiel explained, answer to bow above territorial authorities. Good hiding place, she acknowledged, but still need way to reach Judge. Martha Wilson might have contacts in Tucson, Ezekiel suggested. Newspaper editors maintain networks. How contact Martha from Mission? Ezekiel considered the problem. The mission serves local tribes, Tohono O'odham mainly. They travel between mission and town regularly. Could carry message, Ayana nodded approval. Good plan. Their strategy settled, they divided the watch as usual. Ezekiel took first shift, finding unexpected energy as their goal drew closer. 4 days of mountain travel had changed them both. Clothes tattered, bodies leaner, resolve strengthened by shared hardship. When Ayana relieved him, he surrendered to sleep with the satisfaction of knowing their journey neared completion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but the mountain passage, the most physically demanding portion, was behind them. Dawn revealed Tucson Valley spread below, a modest settlement surrounded by desert, the Santa Cruz River creating a ribbon of green through arid landscape. Smoke from morning cooking fires rose in thin columns above adobe buildings. Civilization, Ezekiel remarked without enthusiasm. Such as it is, Ayana replied dryly. They began their descent, moving carefully through increasingly populated areas. By midday, they had reached the lower foothills, where scattered homesteads replaced wilderness. Caution became paramount. They avoided roads, skirting field edges and using arroyos for concealment. Twice they froze as riders passed nearby, though neither group appeared to be searching specifically for fugitives. Late afternoon brought them within sight of Mission San Javier, its white towers gleaming against the desert backdrop. Established a century earlier by Jesuit missionaries, the White Dove of the desert provided both spiritual center and practical assistance to local tribes. How approach? Ayana asked, studying the mission from concealment. Directly, Ezekiel decided. Religious sanctuary is recognized even in frontier justice. They won't turn us away. Summoning their remaining energy, they walked openly toward the mission's entrance. Several Tohono O'odham families gathered in the courtyard regarded them with curiosity. Ezekiel's trail-worn appearance and Ayana's imposing height creating an unusual spectacle. A black-robed priest emerged from the church, studying the newcomers with cautious interest. "Peace be with you, travelers," he greeted in accented English. "I am Father Miguel. How may we assist you?" "We seek sanctuary," Ezekiel replied directly, "and help delivering important documents to Judge Hollister in Tucson." Recognition flickered in the priest's eyes. "You are Ezekiel Marsh. The territorial papers describe you as a dangerous renegade." "The papers lie," Ezekiel responded evenly. "We carry evidence of corruption that powerful men want suppressed." Father Miguel considered this, then nodded toward the mission entrance. "Come inside. The church offers shelter to all who seek it peacefully." Relief flooded through Ezekiel as they followed the priest into the cool interior. After days in wilderness, the mission's ordered tranquility felt almost disorienting. Father Miguel led them to a small room adjacent to the main church, furnishing them with water and simple food while they explained their situation. The priest listened without interruption, his expression revealing neither judgment nor immediate acceptance. "Judge Hollister is indeed a man of integrity," he confirmed when they finished. "One of few judicial officials who treat Indian defendants fairly." "Can you help us reach him?" Ezekiel asked. "Directly, no. The mission must maintain neutrality in territorial disputes." Father Miguel stroked his gray beard thoughtfully. "However, Judge Hollister attends Mass here every Sunday. Tomorrow, in fact." "Perfect timing," Ezekiel observed with the first genuine optimism in days. "Perhaps providential," the priest suggested with a slight smile. "Meanwhile, you may rest here safely. The church's sanctuary remains respected even by territorial authorities." He showed them to simple sleeping quarters used by visiting pilgrims, promising to bring additional food and medical supplies for Ezekiel's wound. Left alone, Ezekiel sank onto a narrow cot with profound gratitude. "We made it," he said softly. "Not finished yet," Ayana cautioned, though her own relief showed clearly. "Documents must reach Judge, testimony given." "Tomorrow," Ezekiel promised. After days in mountains, waiting one night seemed simple enough. Father Miguel returned with promised supplies and unexpected news. "A rider from the north brought word this afternoon," he informed them. "Federal troops have moved against railroad survey crews near the Navajo reservation." Ayana straightened, alarm evident. "Attack on my people?" "No," the priest clarified quickly. "The soldiers are preventing survey work, not supporting it." Apparently, orders came directly from Washington, countermanding territorial requests. Cooper's superiors must have acted, Ezekiel realized. Even without his evidence, they suspected enough to intervene. The timing is fortunate, Father Miguel agreed. Though Blackwood's influence in Tucson remains strong, Judge Hollister faces considerable pressure from business interests supporting the railroad. All the more reason our evidence must reach him tomorrow, Ezekiel emphasized. The priest nodded gravely. Rest tonight. I will arrange a private meeting after Mass. With their immediate future secured, exhaustion claimed them both. Ezekiel slept deeply for the first time since leaving Prescott, his body finally surrendering to the healing it desperately needed. Morning brought renewed vigor, aided by proper food and the mission's peaceful atmosphere. Father Miguel provided clean clothing, simple garments donated for the needy, but immeasurably better than their trail-worn attire. Judge Hollister arrives for early Mass, the priest informed them. I've arranged for you to meet him in the sacristy afterward. Will he come alone? Ezekiel asked. He typically travels with his clerk, a young man named Peterson, trustworthy from what I know. Ayanna remains skeptical. Blackwood has many spies. Judge may be watched. The mission grounds are considered neutral territory, Father Miguel assured her. Even territorial officials respect this tradition. As church bells summoned the faithful, Ezekiel and Ayanna waited in the small room adjacent to the sacristy. Through a narrow window, they observed congregants arriving, local families, both Hispanic and O'odham, along with a few Anglo settlers. Judge Hollister proved unmistakable, a tall, austere figure in his 60s, white hair contrasting with formal black attire. He arrived alone, contrary to Father Miguel's expectation, and entered the church with dignified purpose. The Mass proceeded with ancient rhythms, Latin phrases echoing through the decorated sanctuary. When the service concluded, Father Miguel escorted the judge to the sacristy, then appeared at the waiting room door. He will see you now, the priest announced. Alone first, then your companion. Ezekiel carried Cooper's document pouch, its contents potentially transformative for territorial politics. Entering the sacristy, he found Judge Hollister standing beside a cabinet of ceremonial vessels, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Marsh, the judge acknowledged, Father Miguel suggests you bring matters of significant importance. Evidence of corruption at the highest levels of territorial government, Ezekiel confirmed, offering the pouch, collected by federal investigator James Cooper before his murder. Hollister accepted the documents cautiously. Serious allegations require substantial proof. Cooper died delivering these papers, Ezekiel said grimly, as did Governor's Representative Davis. Nothing in that pouch came cheaply. The judge examined each document methodically, his expression darkening as he progressed. When he finished, he looked up with new intensity. If authentic, these documents justify immediate action, he stated. Suspension of all railroad operations pending federal investigation, possibly criminal charges against multiple officials. They're authentic, Ezekiel assured him. Cooper verified their provenance before his death. Where has this evidence been since the Prescott incident? A complicated journey, Ezekiel replied, briefly outlining their path from Prescott through San Carlos to the mountain passage. Hollister nodded slowly. Your testimony will be essential at any hearing. These documents alone, without context, could be dismissed as forgeries. I'm prepared to testify, Ezekiel confirmed, as is Ayanna, daughter of Chief Nalish. She witnessed Blackwood's operations firsthand, including kidnapping attempts against tribal leadership. The Navajo woman who traveled with you? Hollister asked with evident surprise. Her testimony would be unprecedented in territorial court, yet essential for complete understanding, Ezekiel insisted. This conspiracy targeted both settlers and native peoples. Justice requires hearing both perspectives. Before Hollister could respond, shouting erupted from the mission courtyard. Through the sacristy window, Ezekiel glimpsed mounted men, at least a dozen, surrounding the church entrance. Blackwood's men, he realized aloud. They found us. Impossible, Father Miguel protested, entering hurriedly. The mission is neutral ground. No one would violate sanctuary. A voice bellowed from outside. Judge Hollister, by authority of the territorial governor, you're ordered to surrender the fugitive Ezekiel Marsh and any documents in your possession. Ezekiel recognized Marshal Kane's distinctive voice, though something in his tone suggested desperation rather than authority. It seems Mr. Blackwood's reach extends even here, Judge Hollister observed grimly. Father Miguel's expression hardened with uncharacteristic anger. This desecration will not stand. The church has protected the vulnerable since before this territory existed. Noble sentiment, Father, Hollister replied pragmatically. But Marshal Kane carries territorial authority. He can claim emergency powers to override even church sanctuary. Ezekiel's mind raced through diminishing options. If Kane arrests me, the documents will disappear before any hearing occurs. Not necessarily, Hollister countered, surprising both men. As federal judge, I can claim jurisdiction over evidence relating to federal investigations. He patted the document pouch. These papers are now officially entered into federal record. Outside, Kane's demands grew more strident. 1 minute, Judge, then we enter by force. There's another way out, Father Miguel offered urgently. Catacombs beneath the church connect to the mission's old well. Local tribespeople use it during ceremonies. Where does it lead? Ezekiel asked. Eventually to the river, half-mile east. From there, many paths into desert. Ezekiel made an instant decision. Ayanna and I will escape that way. Judge Hollister, can you delay them long enough? The judge nodded firmly. As federal judge, I can create considerable legal obstacles, perhaps enough for you to reach safety. And where is safety now? Ezekiel asked bitterly. The Wilson's Ranch, Hollister suggested. Martha's newspaper has created surprising public support. Even territorial officials hesitate to move directly against her. 20 miles northwest, Ezekiel calculated. If we can reach the desert undetected, Father Miguel hurried them toward a small door concealed behind a tapestry. I will bring your companion. Go now. Follow the marked path. White handprints on stone show the way. As the priest departed, Judge Hollister gripped Ezekiel's arm. I'll initiate federal proceedings immediately, he promised. Blackwood's influence ends today. Be careful, Ezekiel warned. He's already killed to protect his interests. Some principles warrant risk, Mr. Marsh. The judge's expression reflected the same determination Ezekiel had seen in Cooper's eyes days earlier. Justice among them. Moments later, Ayanna joined him at the hidden entrance, Father Miguel providing a small lantern for the underground passage. God's protection go with you, the priest blessed them as they descended worn stone steps into darkness. Behind them, the confrontation continued. Kane's threats met with Hollister's precise legal counter-arguments. The delay would provide precious minutes for their escape, but discovery remained inevitable once the marshal lost patience. The catacombs proved ancient and complex, narrow passages connecting larger chambers, some bearing faded religious artwork from earlier centuries. White handprints marked critical junctions, guiding them through what would otherwise be a hopeless maze. How far to exit? Ayanna whispered, ducking beneath a low archway. Father Miguel said half-mile to river, Ezekiel replied, consulting rough directions the priest had hastily provided. Should be approaching soon. As if confirming his assessment, fresh air currents stirred the stale atmosphere. Ahead, natural light filtered down a shaft lined with crude handholds. The mission's old well, now dry, but providing access to the surface. Ezekiel examined the climbing challenge with concern. His shoulder had improved during their brief rest, but ascending the narrow shaft would test his recovery severely. I go first, Ayanna decided practically. Test holds. Help from above. Her height and strength made the climb appear almost effortless. Within minutes, she had reached the top, confirming their location near the riverbank, hidden from the mission by intervening structures. Ezekiel followed more laboriously, each upward reach sending sharp pain through his healing wound. Halfway up, his strength nearly failed, arm muscles trembling with exhaustion. Almost there, Ayanna encouraged, extending her arm down the shaft. 3 more holds. With monumental effort, he forced himself upward, finally grasping her outstretched hand. Her remarkable strength pulled him the remaining distance, depositing him beside the well's crumbling stonework. They emerged into late morning sunlight beside the Santa Cruz River, little more than a stream during the dry season, but providing crucial cover with its border of cottonwoods and willows. Which direction? Ayanna asked, scanning for immediate threats. Northwest, Ezekiel indicated, orienting himself by the sun's position. Follow the river for cover, then cross desert to Wilson Ranch. They moved quickly but cautiously along the riverbank, using natural vegetation for concealment. Behind them, commotion at the mission suggested Kane had finally forced entry, discovering their escape. They will pursue, Ayana predicted grimly. With horses against people on foot, Ezekiel acknowledged, we need transportation. Opportunity appeared at a small farm half-mile downriver, two horses grazing in a modest corral. No dwelling was visible, suggesting the owner worked elsewhere. Borrowing without permission, Ayana observed as they approached the animals. Necessity, Ezekiel justified, though the rationalization felt hollow. We'll send payment when possible. The horses, decent quarter horses rather than farm plugs, accepted their approach without alarm. Years of ranch work had given Ezekiel skill with even unfamiliar mounts. Within minutes, they had fashioned makeshift bridles from rope and mounted bareback. Northwest, Ezekiel confirmed, pointing toward distant mountains. Wilson Ranch lies in that valley. They urged their mounts forward, leaving the river's protection for open desert. The morning heat intensified as they rode, shimmering waves rising from baked earth. Behind them, dust clouds suggested pursuit had begun, at least 3 groups of riders spreading out to cover possible escape routes. Marshall determined, Ayana noted, glancing back at their pursuers. Desperate, Ezekiel corrected. Blackwood must have promised severe consequences for failure. They pushed their borrowers' horses hard, knowing endurance mattered more than momentary speed. The animals responded admirably, maintaining steady pace across increasingly rugged terrain. By midday, they had gained significant distance, though pursuit remained visible. The mountains ahead grew closer, promising better defensive positions if they could reach higher ground. Wilson Ranch beyond that ridge, Ezekiel indicated as they paused briefly to rest their mounts. Maybe 2 hours at this pace. Ayana studied their back trail with concern. Pursuers gaining slightly, fresh horses probably. We'll reach the ranch first, Ezekiel assured her, though uncertainty nagged. Martha's newspaper has created public support. Kane won't risk confrontation with armed settlers. They continued northwest, entering foothills that offered improved concealment. The horses struggled on steeper sections, forcing slower progress than Ezekiel had hoped. Behind them, pursuit had consolidated, a single group of riders following their trail directly rather than spreading wide. The change suggested confidence rather than uncertainty, as though their destination had become known. Informant must have revealed Wilson Ranch as likely refuge, Ezekiel reasoned grimly. Kane knows exactly where we're heading. How many guns at ranch? Ayana asked practically. Unknown. Martha mentioned settler support, but numbers could be exaggerated. They crested a final ridge, revealing their destination spread below. Wilson Ranch, larger than Ezekiel remembered, with multiple outbuildings surrounding the main house. Several wagons stood in the yard, suggesting recent arrivals. Most encouragingly, armed figures patrolled the property perimeter, at least a dozen men establishing clear defensive positions. Looks like Martha wasn't exaggerating after all, Ezekiel observed with renewed hope. They urged their tired mounts down the slope, within shouting distance of the nearest sentries. Recognition came quickly. Harold Wilson himself moved to intercept them. Rifle ready, but unthreatening. Marsh, the old storekeeper called. Thank God. We thought you dead after San Carlos. Nearly was, Ezekiel acknowledged, dismounting stiffly. Marshal Kane follows close behind, at least 10 riders. Harold's expression darkened. Let him come. 30 settlers here now, all with reason to hate Blackwood, plus some unexpected allies. Before Ezekiel could question this cryptic reference, another figure emerged from the main house. A tall, imposing woman whose identity brought instant joy. Itel, Ayana cried, genuine emotion breaking through her warrior's composure. The sisters embraced briefly but intensely, communicating more through that simple contact than many could with hours of conversation. You live, Itel stated simply, then included Ezekiel in her satisfied gaze. Both live. Good. The documents reached Judge Hollister, Ezekiel reported. Federal proceedings should begin immediately. Then Blackwood truly defeated, Itel concluded with satisfaction. Not yet, Harold cautioned, pointing toward the ridge they had just ascended. Kane's men approach, and they're not alone. The dust cloud had grown significantly, suggesting not just Kane's posse but substantial reinforcements. How many? Ezekiel asked, stomach tightening with renewed apprehension. 20, maybe 30 riders, Harold estimated grimly. More than expected, Martha Wilson joined them, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. Despite her age, she carried herself with unmistakable authority. Inside quickly, she directed, much to discuss before they arrive. The main house had been transformed into an impromptu command center, maps spread across dining tables, weapons stacked in corners, supplies organized for potential siege. Most surprisingly, the room contained an unexpected mixture of allies, settlers in weather-worn clothing alongside several Apache warriors, and, most astonishingly, a small contingent of Navajo led by a dignified elder. "Father!" Ayana exclaimed, genuine shock breaking through her composure. Chief Nalish stepped forward, his expression revealing momentary emotion before returning to customary dignity. "Daughters returned safely," he acknowledged, "as expected from warriors of your training." "How?" Ezekiel asked, bewildered by the chief's presence so far from Navajo territory. "Alliance grows beyond expectations," Nalish explained. "Apache messengers brought news of San Carlos attack. Common enemy creates uncommon friendships." Martha elaborated. Chief Nalish arrived 3 days ago with 20 warriors, all legally designated as diplomatic envoys under the treaty, preventing military interference. "In Blackwood's response?" Ezekiel asked. "Increasingly desperate," Harold reported. "Attempted bribing territorial officials to authorize military action against renegade Indians gathering here. When that failed, he's apparently decided on direct action." The approaching force, Ezekiel realized. His private army rather than official law enforcement. "Marshal Kane leads them," Martha confirmed, "but he's essentially acting as Blackwood's hired gun now. The territorial governor has officially suspended him pending investigation." The implications registered immediately. Kane no longer carried legal authority, making any attack against the ranch simple criminal action rather than law enforcement. "Blackwood risks everything on this final confrontation," Ezekiel observed. "Why, the documents are already with Judge Hollister." "Because it's no longer about documents," Martha replied grimly. "It's about silencing witnesses before federal hearings begin. You, Ayana, Chief Nalish, all can testify to Blackwood's crimes directly." Through the windows, they could see the approaching riders descending the ridge, Marshal Kane's distinctive figure in the lead, followed by a mixed group of deputized townsmen and hired gunfighters. "We have superior position, comparable numbers," Harold assessed. "They'd be fools to attack directly." "Desperation creates foolishness," Chief Nalish observed philosophically. "Cornered predator fights without concern for survival." Ezekiel moved to the window, studying the approaching force with experienced military assessment. "They're organizing for frontal assault," he confirmed grimly. "Kane's abandoned all pretense of legal action." "Then we defend accordingly," Martha declared. "Harold, position our people. Chief Nalish, perhaps your warriors could cover the eastern approach." As preparations accelerated around him, Ezekiel felt a strange calm descend. The long journey from his isolated ranch had led to this moment, not just a confrontation between armed groups, but a fundamental clash of values. Land as commodity versus land as sacred trust. Exploitation versus stewardship. Corruption versus justice. Whatever happened in the coming hours would reshape the territory's future for generations. The responsibility weighed heavily, yet brought clarity that Ezekiel had sought his entire life. This was worth fighting for, worth dying for, if necessary. Ayana appeared beside him, reading his expression with characteristic perception. "Final battle approaches," she stated simply. "Not just for us," Ezekiel replied, "for everything we believe in." Her hand found his briefly, strong fingers conveying support without words. "Together," she affirmed. Outside, Marshal Kane's voice carried across the ranch yard, amplified by desperation and rage. "Ezekiel Marsh, by authority vested in me as federal marshal, I order you to surrender immediately. All others harboring this fugitive will face similar charges." "He still claims official authority," Harold observed disgustedly, "even after suspension." "Because Blackwood's strategy requires maintaining that pretense," Martha concluded. "Otherwise, this is simply armed assault on private property." Whilst Chief Nalish studied the approaching force with experienced warriors' assessment. "They attack within minutes," he predicted. "Last chance to avoid bloodshed." Ezekiel made his decision. I'll speak with Kane, he announced. Perhaps reason remains possible. Before others could object, he moved toward the door, determination outweighing caution. This conflict had already claimed too many lives. Cooper, Davis, Eagle Eye, and Longwalker, countless others damaged by Blackwood's ruthless ambition. If his actions could prevent further bloodshed, the risk seemed worthwhile. Not alone, Ayanna stated firmly, following him onto the porch. Together they faced the assembled force, 30 armed men led by a lawman who had abandoned his oath for corruption's rewards. "Marshal Kane," Ezekiel called, voice carrying across the yard. "You've been officially suspended. Any action you take now lacks legal authority." "Territorial governor has no jurisdiction over federal marshals," Kane retorted, though uncertainty tinged his voice. "Judge Hollister has the documents," Ezekiel continued. "Federal proceedings have already begun. This attack only adds to charges against you and Blackwood." Confusion spread visibly among Kane's men, particularly the deputized townspeople who had believed they served legitimate law enforcement. Several exchanged uncomfortable glances, rifles lowering slightly. "He's lying," Kane shouted desperately. "The documents are forgeries. Marsh is a criminal working with hostile Indians." From the house behind them, Martha Wilson emerged, newspaper in hand. The latest edition contains sworn affidavits from 17 witnesses to Blackwood's corruption, she announced, voice carrying remarkable power for her age. Copies have already reached Washington via military courier. More of Kane's men shifted uneasily, the momentum visibly changing. Hired gunmen might risk fighting for pay, but townspeople wanted no part of opposing federal authority. "Stand fast," Kane commanded, but his control was clearly slipping. In that critical moment, a new arrival changed everything. Behind Kane's force, a cloud of dust announced approaching riders. A military patrol, blue uniforms unmistakable, even at distance. "Army reinforcements," someone in Kane's group called anxiously. "We need to withdraw, Marshal." "No!" Kane's composure shattered completely. "Blackwood promised." He caught himself, realizing his damning admission. The disintegration happened with surprising speed. Townsmen turned their horses, abandoning the confrontation entirely. Even hired gunmen recognized the changing situation, melting away in different directions. Within minutes, only Kane remained with a handful of diehards, men too committed to Blackwood's cause or too implicated in previous crimes to surrender. "It's over, Marshal," Ezekiel stated simply. "Surrender peacefully." For a moment, it seemed Kane might comply. Then madness claimed his features. "Blackwood will never let this happen," he snarled, drawing his revolver with practiced speed. Ezekiel had no time to react, the marshal's aim finding him with deadly accuracy. He braced for impact, knowing his position offered no cover. The shot never came. Instead, Ayanna moved with astonishing speed, her powerful frame intercepting Kane's line of fire. Her rifle spoke once, the bullet striking Kane's shoulder and spoiling his aim. The marshal's shot went wide as he tumbled from his horse, weapon falling from nerveless fingers. The remaining gunmen, seeing their leader fallen, threw down weapons as the army patrol arrived, a lieutenant leading 20 troopers with rifles ready. "Federal authority," the young officer announced crisply. "All civilians are ordered to disarm immediately." The confrontation ended with anticlimactic speed. Kane and his remaining men disarmed and arrested, the army establishing temporary control over the ranch. As the lieutenant conferred with Martha Wilson and Chief Nalish, Ezekiel turned to Ayanna. "You saved my life," he said simply. "Alliance means nothing if abandoned when tested," she replied, echoing her words from days earlier. Yet something had changed, in her eyes, in the connection between them. What had begun as reluctant partnership had transformed into something neither could easily define. Before Ezekiel could respond, the lieutenant approached. "Mr. Marsh, I have orders to escort you and Chief Nalish's delegation to Tucson immediately. Judge Hollister has convened an emergency federal hearing." "What about Blackwood?" Ezekiel asked. "Federal marshals from California have arrested him in Prescott," the officer reported with satisfaction. "He's being transported to Tucson under heavy guard." After weeks of desperate struggle, justice seemed suddenly, improbably within reach. Blackwood's carefully constructed empire of corruption collapsing under the weight of exposed truth. Yet as Ezekiel looked at Ayanna, this remarkable woman who had journeyed beside him through wilderness, danger, and transformation, he realized that something more significant had emerged from their ordeal. Understanding, respect, partnership between cultures that had viewed each other with suspicion for generations. "We ride for Tucson," Chief Nalish decided. "Final testimony must be given." Ezekiel nodded agreement, though uncertainty clouded his thoughts. Once justice was secured, what then? Would he return to his isolated ranch? Would Ayanna resume her role on the reservation? The questions remained unanswered as they prepared for one final journey, the shortest in distance but perhaps the most significant in meaning. Justice awaited in Tucson. Beyond that lay an unwritten future neither could predict. Tucson's federal courthouse stood as an island of Eastern authority amid frontier chaos, a stone building whose formal architecture seemed transplanted from Washington rather than grown from Arizona soil. Inside, Judge Hollister presided over proceedings unprecedented in territorial history. The courtroom overflowed with spectators. Territorial officials sat uncomfortably beside settlers and ranchers. Newspaper reporters scribbled furiously, documenting each revelation for readers across the nation. Most remarkably, representatives from three tribes, Navajo, Apache, and Tohono O'odham, had been granted formal seating, their presence acknowledging the multicultural nature of the injustice under examination. Jacob Blackwood occupied the defendant's table, his customary confidence replaced by ashen resignation. Without his usual fine tailoring and commanding presence, he seemed diminished, merely an aging man facing consequences long overdue. Beside him sat his attorney, imported from San Francisco at considerable expense. Despite professional composure, the lawyer's expression revealed awareness that his client's position verged on hopeless. For 3 days, witnesses had detailed Blackwood's corruption, fraudulent land acquisitions, bribery of officials, intimidation tactics, even orchestrated violence against those who opposed his railroad ambitions. Marshall Kane had already testified, accepting reduced charges in exchange for comprehensive admission of his role as Blackwood's enforcer. His testimony implicated not just the railroad baron, but multiple territorial officials, creating political earthquake that reverberated beyond Arizona. Now came the final witnesses, Ezekiel Marsh and Chief Nalish, representing both settler and native perspectives on Blackwood's crimes. Judge Hollister called Ezekiel first, administering the oath with solemn formality. The courtroom fell silent as he began his testimony, the culmination of a journey that had transformed him from isolated rancher to reluctant crusader for justice. "Mr. Marsh," the federal prosecutor began, "please describe your first encounter with Mr. Blackwood's business practices." Ezekiel recounted the initial pressure to sell his land, the escalating intimidation tactics, and finally the discovery of Cooper's investigation. His testimony moved methodically through events at Prescott, the deaths of Cooper and Davis, the desperate journey to San Carlos and beyond. Throughout his account, Blackwood stared fixedly at the table before him, refusing eye contact with the man whose persistence had unraveled his empire. When Ezekiel described the attack on San Carlos Agency, several military officers in attendance exchanged troubled glances. The illegal assault on a government reservation remained an extraordinary breach, even by frontier standards. "And you believe Mr. Blackwood orchestrated this attack personally?" the prosecutor asked. "He controlled Marshall Kane completely," Ezekiel replied firmly. "Welding of this magnitude happened without Blackwood's direct approval." The defense attorney rose for cross-examination, his approach reflecting limited options for challenging such damning testimony. "Mr. Marsh, you've admitted to harboring Navajo women wanted by territorial authorities, resisting arrest, fleeing across territorial boundaries, even stealing horses. Why should this court consider you a credible witness rather than a criminal yourself?" Ezekiel met the challenge directly. "I've hidden nothing about my actions. When laws serve corruption rather than justice, following conscience becomes necessary. Every step I took aimed to expose truth that powerful men wanted buried." "Very noble," the attorney remarked sarcastically. "But isn't it true that your opposition to Mr. Blackwood's railroad began with simple financial self-interest? You wanted more money for your land." "My land wasn't for sale at any price," Ezekiel corrected. "Not because of monetary value, but because it represented everything I had left after losing my family in Pennsylvania. Blackwood never understood that some things can't be measured in dollars. The defense attorney attempted several more challenges, but Ezekiel's straightforward responses left little room for undermining his credibility. When finally excused, he returned to his seat, conscious of having fulfilled his obligation to Cooper's memory and to justice itself. Chief Nalish followed, his dignified bearing and formal English surprising many spectators who expected stereotypical Indian testimony. The Navajo leader described Blackwood's attempts to seize reservation land, the kidnapping of his daughters, and the broader pattern of corruption that threatened both native peoples and honest settlers. Most powerfully, he produced documentation of bribes Blackwood had offered tribal representatives, written evidence the railroad baron had foolishly provided, believing Navajo recipients wouldn't preserve such records. "We understand paper speaks louder than memory in white man's courts," Chief Nalish explained with subtle irony. "So we kept everything." During cross-examination, the defense attorney attempted to discredit the chief by questioning the veracity of Indian promises and suggesting tribal representatives had misunderstood business negotiations. Chief Nalish's response silenced the courtroom. "I speak 5 languages, sir. I have read your Constitution, your Bible, and your legal codes. My people occupied this land for 1,000 years before your client arrived with paper promises and hidden knives. Do not mistake patience for ignorance." The defense attorney abandoned further questioning. As testimony concluded, Judge Hollister addressed the packed courtroom with unusual solemnity. "These proceedings have exposed corruption unprecedented in territorial history. Mr. Blackwood's actions represent not merely violation of specific statutes, but fundamental betrayal of the principles upon which law itself stands." He turned his attention directly to the defendant. "Jacob Blackwood, having considered all testimony and evidence, this court finds you guilty on 37 counts, including bribery of public officials, conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of government documents, and accessory to murder." The sentence followed: 20 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets acquired through illegal means, and permanent prohibition from involvement in railroad or mining enterprises. As marshals led Blackwood away, his empire collapsed completely. The courtroom erupted in conversations, reporters rushing to file stories that would reshape territorial politics for years to come. Ezekiel remained seated, strangely detached from the victory unfolding around him. Justice had been served, Blackwood's corruption exposed and punished. Yet a hollow feeling persisted. What came next? His ranch remained miles away, partially destroyed during his absence. His purpose, so clear during the desperate journey to Tucson, now seemed undefined. Outside the courthouse, Martha Wilson intercepted him. "Magnificent victory, Ezekiel. My newspaper's special edition goes to press tonight. Your testimony will reach readers across the country." "What happens with the land claims?" he asked practically. "Blackwood acquired thousands of acres through fraud. Judge Hollister has appointed special commission to review each transaction," Martha replied. "Legal owners will have property returned where possible. Complex process, but justice-oriented. And the Navajo reservation boundaries? Fully restored according to original treaty," she confirmed. Chief Nalish achieved complete victory on that front. Complete victory. The word should have brought satisfaction. Instead, Ezekiel found himself searching the courthouse steps for Ayana's distinctive figure. Throughout the proceedings, she had maintained formal distance, seated with Navajo representatives rather than beside him, as during their journey. He spotted her finally, standing with Itel and her father as they received congratulations from tribal members. Even amid celebration, she maintained warrior's awareness, her gaze meeting his across the crowded steps. Something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement of journey's end, perhaps, or recognition that paths which had converged now faced inevitable divergence. Before he could approach, Harold Wilson appeared with unexpected news. "Telegraph just arrived from Prescott," the storekeeper announced breathlessly. "Territorial governor resigned this morning. 3 council members, too. Washington appointing interim administration until elections." "Blackwood's network collapses," Ezekiel observed. "Complete house cleaning," Harold agreed enthusiastically. "Opportunity for honest government at last." Around them, celebration continued, settlers and tribal representatives alike recognizing the historic significance of Blackwood's downfall. Yet Ezekiel found himself unable to fully join the revelry, his thoughts drawn increasingly toward what awaited beyond this moment of triumph. Later that evening, Judge Hollister hosted reception for key participants in the proceedings. The gathering mixed cultural boundaries remarkably. Territorial officials conversed with tribal leaders. Military officers engaged respectfully with settlers who had opposed them days earlier. Ezekiel moved through conversations mechanically, accepting congratulations while scanning repeatedly for Ayanna. When he finally located her in the courtyard, she stood apart from the celebration, gazing toward distant mountains visible in twilight. "Not enjoying the victory?" he asked, joining her. "Victory has different meanings," she replied. "For my people, merely chance to continue existing. White officials make promises tonight they may forget tomorrow." "Judge Hollister seems genuine," Ezekiel suggested. "The commission reviewing land claims includes tribal representatives." Perhaps. Her skepticism reflected generations of broken promises. "Father believes opportunity exists for better understanding. I remain cautious." They stood in silence, the evening celebration continuing behind them while darkness gathered over Tucson's adobe buildings. "What will you do now?" Ayanna asked finally. The question had haunted him since the verdict. "Return to my ranch, I suppose. Rebuild what Blackwood's men destroyed." "Alone?" As before, he attempted lightness, at least with clearer title now that Blackwood's claims have been invalidated. Ayanna nodded, her expression unreadable. "My father returns to reservation tomorrow. Tribal council requires leadership during uncertain transition." "And you?" Ezekiel asked, surprising himself with how much her answer mattered. "Daughter's place follows father's need," she replied, though something in her tone suggested internal conflict. "Much work rebuilding trust with federal authorities." Another silence fell between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Their journey had forged connection that transcended ordinary alliance, shared danger, mutual respect, growing understanding across cultural divides. "We should rejoin the others," Ayanna suggested finally. "Father gives formal thanks to Judge soon." As they turned toward the reception, Chief Nalish himself approached, his expression suggesting purpose rather than coincidence. "Daughter, Mr. Marsh." He acknowledged them with formal nod. "Judge requests private meeting. Important matters to discuss." They followed the chief to Judge Hollister's chambers, where the jurist awaited with several documents spread across his desk. "Thank you for coming," Hollister began once the door closed. "I wanted to discuss certain matters outside public proceedings." He selected a particular map, displaying territorial boundaries including Ezekiel's ranch and the Navajo reservation to the north. "Mr. Marsh, the commission has already determined your land title remains valid, unaffected by Blackwood's fraudulent claims." The judge indicated the property boundaries. "However, review of original survey documents reveals interesting discrepancy." Ezekiel tensed, anticipating some new challenge to his hard-won victory. "The government land grant originally awarded to you actually encompasses additional acreage to the north," Hollister continued, indicating an area Ezekiel had always believed belonged to adjacent public lands. "Approximately 80 acres, including the spring-fed valley beyond your current northern fence line." "I never claimed that land," Ezekiel noted, confused by this revelation. "Precisely why I wish to speak privately," Hollister replied. "That valley sits a geographic position of particular significance." Chief Nalish spoke then, his formal demeanor softening slightly. "Valley contains headwaters feeding streams on reservation, sacred place to Navajo people." Understanding dawned. "You're concerned about conflict over water rights," Ezekiel concluded. "Such disputes have sparked violence throughout the territory," Hollister confirmed. "With Blackwood's corruption exposed, we have unprecedented opportunity to establish new patterns of cooperation between settlers and tribal nations." The judge's meaning became clear. Ezekiel's newly recognized claim to the valley could either become source of future conflict or foundation for different relationship with his Navajo neighbors. "What exactly are you suggesting, Judge?" he asked directly. "Several possibilities exist," Hollister replied. "You could assert full ownership rights, of course. The commission would support legally established boundaries." Chief Nalish remained impassive, though Ayanna's slight tension revealed the significance of this option. "Alternatively," Hollister continued, "formal water-sharing agreement could be established, guaranteeing both your agricultural needs and downstream tribal access." "Or," Ezekiel prompted, sensing the judge had additional proposal in mind. Or you might consider boundary adjustment, transferring the valley to tribal trust while retaining specified water rights for your ranch. Hollister met his gaze directly, creating model for cooperative resource management that might influence similar disputes throughout the territory. The suggestion represented extraordinary departure from typical frontier dynamics, where property boundaries became battle lines rather than opportunities for mutual benefit. My people would ensure your ranch receives necessary water, Chief Nalish added. Sacred spring brings obligation to share its gifts. Ezekiel considered the proposal carefully. The Northern Valley held minimal agricultural value for his small cattle operation, yet clearly carried spiritual significance for the Navajo. His journey with Ayanna had transformed his understanding of land, not as mere property, but as living connection between generations past and future. I'll transfer the valley to tribal trust, he decided, with formal agreement guaranteeing water access for my ranch. Relief flickered briefly across Ayanna's stoic features, subtle but noticeable to someone who had learned to read her expressions during their shared ordeal. Generous decision, Chief Nalish acknowledged, extending his hand in formal gratitude. Demonstrates wisdom rare among settlers. Judge Hollister nodded approval. I'll prepare necessary documentation tomorrow. The commission will recognize this voluntary arrangement as binding precedent. As they concluded the meeting, Ezekiel realized he had committed to remaining on his ranch indefinitely. The water rights agreement only making sense if he intended to continue ranching operations. Yet the decision felt right, reflecting deeper understanding of his place in the landscape. Outside the judge's chambers, Chief Nalish excused himself to rejoin the reception, leaving Ezekiel and Ayanna momentarily alone in the courthouse corridor. Your decision honors the land, she said quietly. Few white men would relinquish newly discovered property rights. The journey changed my perspective, Ezekiel admitted. I see boundaries differently now, less as barriers than as meeting places. Something shifted in Ayanna's expression, resolve forming beneath her customary reserve. There is matter I must discuss with my father, she announced abruptly, before tomorrow's departure. Before Ezekiel could respond, she strode purposefully toward the reception, leaving him puzzled by her sudden intensity. Dawn painted Tucson's adobe buildings in golden light as preparations for departure began. The Navajo delegation readied horses for the long journey north, while Ezekiel made more modest arrangements for his return to the ranch. Judge Hollister had delivered the promised documentation, formal transfer of the Northern Valley to tribal trust, with guaranteed water rights for Ezekiel's property. The agreement established precedent that would influence territorial water law for generations to come. As Ezekiel secured supplies to his saddle, Harold Wilson approached with news from Prescott. Martha's staying another week to cover the commission hearings, he explained. Wanted me to tell you repairs have already started at your ranch. Repairs? Ezekiel questioned. What repairs? Settlers who supported us during confrontation, Harold clarified, volunteered to rebuild what Blackwood's men destroyed. Barn nearly complete, I hear. The unexpected kindness caught Ezekiel off guard. For 7 years, he had worked his land in solitary independence, maintaining minimal connections with neighbors. Now strangers had taken initiative to restore his property without request or compensation. That's remarkably generous, he managed. Community discovered its strength during crisis, Harold observed. Martha says cooperation might actually outlast immediate danger. Revolutionary concept for the territory. As they spoke, the Navajo delegation emerged from their lodgings, Chief Nalish leading, followed by tribal elders and warriors. Etel's distinctive height made her immediately identifiable among them. Ezekiel scanned the group for Ayanna, strangely anxious about their farewell. Throughout their journey, he had grown accustomed to her presence, her strength, her insights, her unexpected moments of humor amid danger. Their imminent separation felt unexpectedly significant. Chief Nalish approached, formal dignity intact despite the early hour. Mr. Marsh, he greeted. Judge Hollister delivered water agreement. My people will honor its provisions faithfully. As will I, Ezekiel affirmed. Safe journey home, Chief. The Navajo leader studied him with unexpected intensity. Journey changes travelers in ways not always visible immediately. You return to your land, different man than left it. True enough, Ezekiel acknowledged. Perspectives shift when forced outside familiar boundaries. Indeed, something resembling amusement flickered across the chief's weathered features. Sometimes new boundaries must be established. Before Ezekiel could decipher this cryptic remark, Chief Nalish gestured toward the delegation's rear, where Ayana had finally appeared. She approached with characteristic dignity, but something had changed. Rather than traveling attire, she wore formal Navajo garments appropriate for significant occasions. Her hair, usually practical in arrangement, had been elaborately braided with silver and turquoise ornaments. "You're dressed formally for the journey," Ezekiel observed, uncertain how to interpret the transformation. "Not for Journey North," she replied directly, "for different path." Chief Nalish stepped forward, addressing Ezekiel with unexpected formality. "My daughter has made request of tribal council. Unusual request requiring considerable discussion." Confusion gave way to dawning realization as Ayana met his gaze steadily. "Request diplomatic assignment," she explained. "Permanent representative to settler communities in Southern Territory, maintaining peaceful relations established through recent alliance." "The council approved?" Ezekiel asked, heart accelerating despite attempts at composure. "With conditions," Chief Nalish interjected. "Representative must establish residence, demonstrating commitment to assigned territory, preferably in location facilitating regular communication with both peoples." Understanding bloomed fully, such as a ranch bordering newly established tribal trust lands? Precisely. For the first time in their acquaintance, Chief Nalish smiled openly. "Sacred Spring in Northern Valley provides meeting place between worlds. Appropriate location for beginning new traditions." Ayana watched Ezekiel's reaction carefully, her warrior's composure temporarily yielding to vulnerability. "Alliance proves stronger than expected," she said quietly. "Perhaps deserves opportunity to develop further." The proposal's magnitude rendered Ezekiel momentarily speechless. Their journey had indeed forged connection transcending ordinary alliance, yet neither had acknowledged possibilities extending beyond immediate crisis. "Your father approves this arrangement?" he asked finally. "Father recognizes wisdom in maintaining strong connections with honest settlers," Chief Nalish replied diplomatically, "and acknowledges daughter's right to determine her own path, having proven capabilities beyond question." The chief's formal language barely disguised more personal endorsement, recognition that his daughter had found partnership worth pursuing despite cultural differences. "I would welcome such an arrangement," Ezekiel said carefully, addressing both Ayana and her father. "The ranch would benefit greatly from diplomatic presence, particularly one with such demonstrated courage and wisdom." Something softened in Ayana's expression, relief perhaps, or satisfaction at formal acceptance matching her own resolve. "Then matter is settled," Chief Nalish declared. "My daughter remains as representative while delegation returns to reservation. Proper ceremonies will follow when appropriate." With matter-of-fact efficiency that belied the arrangement's extraordinary nature, the chief rejoined his delegation, leaving Ezekiel and Ayana standing together amid Tucson's morning bustle. "This is significant decision," Ezekiel said when others had moved beyond hearing. "Living among settlers hasn't always proved safe for your people." "Times change," Ayana replied practically. "Blackwood's defeat creates new possibilities. Someone must build bridges where only walls existed before." "And that's your motivation? Diplomatic service?" Her gaze met his directly, characteristic forthrightness replacing formal diplomatic language. "Not only motivation," she acknowledged, "journey revealed unexpected compatibility. Worth exploring further." The admission, modest by some standards, represented remarkable vulnerability from a woman whose training emphasized emotional discipline above all. Ezekiel recognized the courage such acknowledgement required. "I felt it too," he confessed. "Wasn't certain how to express it across cultural differences." "Cultural differences matter less than character similarities," she observed. "Both value honor, independence, protection of what matters, foundations stronger than surface distinctions." Her practical assessment echoed his own developing perspective. Their differences, while real, seemed increasingly secondary to fundamental compatibility revealed through shared ordeal. "The ranch isn't much," he cautioned, "especially after Blackwood's destruction. Simple place compared to what you might be accustomed to." Ayana's rare smile transformed her features. "Have lived in army tents, canyon shelters, and mission catacombs with you, Ezekiel Marsh. Doubt ranch presence greater hardship than bullet wounds and pursuit through mountains. Her logic proved irrefutable. Their journey had indeed tested compatibility under circumstances far more challenging than peacetime ranch operations. "When do we leave for home?" she asked, the final word carrying particular significance. Home. The concept expanded beyond physical structure or property boundaries, becoming something shared rather than solitary, communal rather than isolated. "Today if you're ready," he replied, though the journey north takes several days. "Already prepared," she assured him, indicating modest pack containing personal possessions. Navajo travel efficiently. As Tucson stirred to full morning activity around them, they completed preparations for departure. Chief Nalish's delegation began their longer journey toward Navajo territory, Itel offering her sister a warrior's embrace before joining them. "Strong woman," Harold observed as they watched the delegation depart. "Both of them. Territory hasn't seen their like before." "No," Ezekiel agreed, though perhaps it should have. Harold studied the unlikely pair with knowing assessment. Martha wondered if something like this might develop. Said she recognized the signs during your recuperation at the ranch. "Martha sees more than most," Ezekiel acknowledged. "That she does." Harold extended his hand in farewell. "Good luck to you both. Territory needs examples of cooperation worth following." As they rode northward, Tucson diminishing behind them, Ezekiel found himself contemplating the journey's remarkable symmetry. He had left his ranch a solitary fugitive, pursued by a corrupted law enforcement and tribal warriors alike. He returned with justice accomplished, corruption exposed, an unexpected partnership established across cultural boundaries previously considered impermeable. "Thinking serious thoughts," Ayana observed as they made camp that evening. "Past or future?" "Both, I suppose," he admitted, "considering how completely life changes when one decides to stand against injustice." "Injustice prevails when good people remain silent," she replied. "Navajo teaching." "Similar wisdom among Quakers," Ezekiel noted. "My mother's people believe silence serves evil." "Another similarity between our traditions," Ayana observed. "Many exist for those willing to look beyond obvious differences." Their conversation continued as night descended, ranging across topics from practical ranch operations to philosophical perspectives on land stewardship. Where cultural differences emerged, they approached them with curious exploration rather than judgment, each recognizing opportunity for mutual enrichment rather than conflict. The journey homeward proceeded without incident, a welcome change from their previous desperate travels across the territory. In settlements along the route, news of Blackwood's conviction had already spread, transforming Ezekiel from fugitive to minor celebrity among those who had suffered under the railroad baron's corruption. "Famous now," Ayana teased after particularly enthusiastic reception in small mining town. "Perhaps should charge for stories about great courtroom victory?" "Fame fades quickly on frontier," Ezekiel replied practically. "Next crisis will replace Blackwood in public memory." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, though some changes remain permanent. Land returned to rightful owners, corrupt officials removed, foundations established for better governance. Her assessment reminded him that their victory extended beyond personal vindication, reshaping territorial politics in ways that would benefit countless others, both settler and native alike. On the journey's final day, they crested the ridge overlooking Ezekiel's ranch. The valley spread below in late afternoon light, familiar yet somehow transformed by his extended absence and altered perspective. As Harold had reported, reconstruction was indeed underway. The barn had been rebuilt completely, several neighbors still working on roof sections. The main house showed fresh repairs, smoke rising cheerfully from its chimney despite Ezekiel's long absence. Most surprisingly, a small crowd had gathered in the yard, perhaps 20 people including several Navajo from nearby reservation lands. Martha Wilson's distinctive silver hair identified her among them, evidently having ridden ahead from Tucson to organize this unexpected welcome. "Not traditional Navajo homecoming," Ayana observed with characteristic dry humor. "Nor traditional settler celebration," Ezekiel agreed. "Something new, apparently." They descended toward this unexpected gathering, representatives of two cultures united in acknowledging something significant in their return. As they approached, Martha stepped forward, beaming with satisfaction. Welcome home, heroes of the territory, she called. We've prepared proper celebration for your return. The gathering included surprising diversity, hardscrabble ranchers alongside Navajo families, former territorial officials beside merchants who had opposed Blackwood's monopolistic practices. United not by cultural similarity, but by shared commitment to justice transcending traditional boundaries. Word of your water-sharing agreement spread quickly, Martha explained as they dismounted. Judge Hollister made certain its significance received proper recognition. Already 3 other ranchers discussing similar arrangements with tribal representatives, added a former territorial clerk. Precedent creating momentum beyond anyone's expectations. As impromptu celebration continued into evening, Ezekiel found moment alone with Martha near the newly rebuilt barn. You've been busy during our absence, he observed, indicating the reconstruction. Community discovered itself during crisis, she replied, echoing Harold's earlier assessment. Many realize isolated homesteads cannot survive without cooperation. Lesson your partnership with Ayanna demonstrated rather dramatically. Speaking of partnerships, Ezekiel began carefully. No explanation necessary, Martha interrupted with knowing smile. Anyone watching you together understands perfectly. Cultural boundaries matter far less than character alignment. Her perceptiveness reminded him why her newspaper had succeeded despite powerful opposition. Martha Wilson saw truth beneath surface appearances, recognizing significant developments before most acknowledged their existence. As celebration wound down and guests departed, Ezekiel and Ayanna found themselves finally alone on the ranch that would now be their shared home. Standing on the porch, they watched stars emerge above familiar mountains. Different from Navajo lands, Ayanna observed, but beautiful in its own way. Its rough country, Ezekiel acknowledged, demands much from those who choose it. Like most worthwhile things. She turned toward him, moonlight illuminating her striking features. This partnership requires adaptation from both sides, creating something new rather than simply combining existing traditions. Worth the effort, he asked, momentarily vulnerable despite their established connection. Already proven through trials more demanding than most marriages face in lifetime, she replied practically. Journey revealed truth about both of us, separately and together. Her assessment reflected characteristic directness, evaluating their relationship through demonstrated actions rather than abstract sentiments. They had indeed tested compatibility under extraordinary circumstances, emerging with deeper understanding than many achieved through years of conventional courtship. What happens now, Ezekiel asked, the question encompassing their personal relationship, the ranch's operation, and broader territorial developments. Now we build something lasting, Ayanna replied simply. Something worthy of sacrifices made to reach this moment. Something future generations might see as turning point when different paths became shared journey. Her vision transcended immediate circumstances, encompassing broader historical significance of their unexpected partnership. What had begun as desperate alliance against corrupt power broker had transformed into opportunity for demonstrating new possibilities on contentious frontier. Ambitious goal, Ezekiel observed. Worthy ambition, she countered. Small actions create larger changes over time. One partnership becomes the example for others. One water-sharing agreement establishes precedent for many. Her perspective echoed his evolving understanding that individual choices accumulated into cultural patterns, either reinforcing existing divisions or creating new possibilities for cooperation. Inside the ranch house, they found unexpected touches reflecting community's thoughtfulness, fresh supplies, repaired furniture, even modest decorative elements combining settler and Navajo aesthetic traditions. The space had been prepared for their shared occupancy with remarkable sensitivity to its cross-cultural significance. Home now, Ayanna stated simply, surveying the modest dwelling, for both of us. The word carried deeper resonance than physical structure or property boundaries. Home as concept transcended cultural differences, representing safety, belonging, and shared purpose across human experience. For both of us, Ezekiel affirmed, the commitment extending beyond immediate moment towards shared future neither could fully envision, but both willingly embraced. Spring arrived with unexpected gentleness, transforming the ranch and surrounding landscape. Winter rains had blessed the territory with abundant moisture, creating wildflower displays across previously barren slopes and strengthening grass for improved cattle grazing. 6 months had passed since their return, months of rebuilding, adaptation, and gradually established routines that bridged cultural differences while honoring essential traditions from both backgrounds. The water-sharing agreement had proven immediately successful. The sacred spring in the Northern Valley continued providing spiritual center for local Navajo while sustainably supporting Ezekiel's modest cattle operation. More significantly, the arrangement had indeed established precedent, followed by neighboring ranchers, creating buffer zone of cooperation rather than conflict along reservation boundaries. Ayana's diplomatic role evolved naturally from formal tribal representative to respected mediator, sought by both settlers and native peoples when disputes arose. Her combination of traditional Navajo wisdom with practical understanding of territorial legal frameworks made her uniquely qualified for bridging cultural divides. The ranch itself had undergone transformation, expanding modestly to incorporate elements from both traditions. A traditional Navajo hogan now stood near the main house, providing ceremonial space, an additional dwelling particularly welcome when tribal representatives visited for diplomatic consultations. Most significantly, regular gatherings now occurred in the Northern Valley, informal councils where settlers and tribal members discussed shared concerns outside official territorial structures. These gatherings, originally Ayana's initiative, had grown increasingly influential in regional decision-making. On this particular spring morning, Ezekiel sat on the porch watching sunrise illuminate distant mountains. Coffee steamed beside him as he reviewed Martha Wilson's latest newspaper edition. The territorial transformation continued. New elections had brought reform-minded officials to power, many explicitly committed to fair treatment of both settler and native communities. Judge Hollister's commission had successfully resolved most fraudulent land claims, restoring property to legitimate owners regardless of cultural background. Blackwood himself had been transferred to federal prison in Kansas, his empire dismantled completely. The railroad ultimately proceeded along modified route respecting both settlement patterns and tribal boundaries, proof that progress need not require exploitation. Ayana emerged from the house, moving with characteristic grace despite visibly advanced pregnancy. Their child, testament to partnership formalized through ceremony combining both traditions, would arrive by early summer, representing physical embodiment of their bridge-building work. Council gathering today, she reminded him, settling carefully beside him. Representatives from 3 tribes attending. Several territorial officials, too. Big day, Ezekiel acknowledged. Martha's coming to document proceedings for historical record. The gathering would formalize arrangements that had developed organically over recent months, creating official advisory council with representation from all regional stakeholders. Though lacking direct legislative authority, the council's recommendations increasingly shaped territorial policy through moral authority and practical wisdom. Land speaks through many voices, Ayana observed, surveying the vibrant landscape surrounding their home. Wisdom comes from listening to all of them. The philosophical observation reflected their shared evolution, developing understanding that transcended individual cultural traditions while honoring essential insights from both. Neither fully Navajo nor completely settler in perspective, but something new emerging from respectful integration. Their personal partnership had followed similar pattern, maintaining distinct cultural identities while creating shared practices honoring both traditions. Regular visits from Chief Nullish and Etel maintained Ayana's tribal connections, while Ezekiel's relationships with neighboring ranchers ensured continued integration with settler community. "Do you ever regret it?" Ezekiel asked unexpectedly. "Choosing this path instead of returning to reservation?" Ayana considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Path not chosen always holds certain appeal," she acknowledged. "But regret suggests mistake made. See no mistake in choices leading here." She placed her hand on rounded abdomen, where their child grew as living symbol of boundaries transcended. Building new traditions requires leaving comfortable patterns. Both cultures needed bridge between them. Someone must be first to cross. Her perspective echoed Ezekiel's own evolving understanding. That meaningful change required individuals willing to step beyond established boundaries, demonstrating possibilities others might eventually follow. "Comfortable patterns nearly destroyed both our peoples," he observed. Blackwood exploited divisions between us, counting on conflict, preventing unified resistance. Common strategy of those seeking power without responsibility, Ayana agreed. Divide natural allies against each other. The conversation paused as riders appeared on the northern ridge, the day's first council participants arriving early. Navajo representatives led by Ital, whose diplomatic responsibilities had expanded following Ayana's relocation south. Ezekiel rose to prepare for their guests, reflecting on journey that had brought them to this moment. From desperate fugitive to community leader, from isolated rancher to partner in cross-cultural alliance, transformation more complete than he could have imagined when first discovering wounded Navajo women in his barn. "Ready?" Ayana asked, joining him as they moved to welcome approaching visitors. "Ready," he confirmed, the word encompassing not just immediate preparations, but broader commitment to path they had chosen together. As morning sun illuminated the valley where Sacred Spring joined their separate worlds, Ezekiel Marsh understood with perfect clarity that land was never truly owned, only borrowed from future generations. Their child would inherit not just property boundaries, but living tradition of cooperation transcending artificial divisions. Some boundaries existed to be respected: cultural traditions, sacred spaces, personal integrity. Others existed to be bridged through understanding, compassion, and recognition of shared humanity beneath surface differences. The land itself had taught this wisdom for those willing to listen. Through drought and abundance, conflict and cooperation, the earth beneath their feet contained lessons transcending any single cultural perspective. As they welcomed guests from both worlds to their shared home, Ezekiel and Ayana stood as living testament that frontiers existed not merely as lines dividing peoples, but as meeting places where new possibilities emerged for those courageous enough to imagine them.